Chapter 451. Kalarn dragged the Count away from the ballroom. He wanted to get out of there as fast as he could. I must find out who that man is. I can't risk angering both the Dawn Court and the Dark Watch. With the support of the Council of the Awakened Ones, those filthy living huggers might even wipe out the Night Court. He thought, Master, why are we running away from a human? Count Zolver was unable to admit his own defeat, let alone understand why a vampire who he considered nigh omnipotent would act so cowardly. Kalarn didn't miss his vassal's allegations, nor the reproachful tone Zolver was daring to address him with. Listen to me, you idiot. Kalarn turned around abruptly with a glare that turned the Count into stone. We are not running away. I never run away. I'm retreating from an unknown threat that you might have unleashed on our court, you imbecile. Judging from his smell, that man is barely 20. Yet he withstood my mental powers and my strength without flinching. It can only mean that he is an awakened, and one with a powerful mentor at that. He also has a Dawn Court pass and allies hidden inside this room. I have nothing to gain from a fight. If I win, the Night Court will kill me for having exposed my nature and ruining all our careful planning to get hold of this city. If I lose, even if I manage to escape, the Night Court would have even more reasons to kill me. Now shut up and follow me. Kalarn was already regretting having taken Zolver as his vassal. The same blind thirst for power that made the Count a perfect lapdog also made him dangerously stupid. If the Night Court wasn't in dire need of the Zolver's household riches and connection with the city lord to expand their area of influence, Kalarn would have already killed the Count for causing that mess. Meanwhile, Litha's left wrist had swollen to the size of an orange and was turning purple because of the compound fracture the vampire had inflicted him. His bluff would have been likely exposed if he hadn't cut off his pain receptors. Damn it, that guy was really strong. Even with fusion magic, I couldn't keep up with him, and I'm almost sure he used only a fraction of his powers. Solus, do you have an estimate of his real strength? Lith thought. Sorry, no. It's the first real blood core we meet. I can only tell you that compared to Kala's or the Count's, Kalarn blood core was mostly composed of blood and with only a few tinges of black. Solus was still shaken by the unexpected encounter. Maybe Litha's paranoia is affecting me too, but I can't help but feel him slipping away from me. Ever since the academy ended, he doesn't need me as he did before. Now he is able to relate to people when he wants to. She thought while looking at Camilla in envy. Without a mana geyser, I'm just a voice in his head. I couldn't help him fight the feeling of isolation he felt while we were in the wild, just like now I couldn't help him against that vampire. By my maker, I feel so helpless. Lith, are you all right? Camilla had regained her cool the moment she had noticed his injury. She took 2 long silver knives and handkerchiefs to splint the wrist, but Lith stopped her. That was close, but yeah, I'm fine. One of his rings released a white light that fixed his injury in a matter of seconds. It was actually a true magic spell. He couldn't waste a ring's charge that he might need soon. Who was that man? How could he be that strong? She asked. We have a situation. He activated his communication earpiece, replying to both Camilla and Journey, to prevent the latter from ruining their plan by having the army and the association storm the place. There is at least a vampire in the ballroom who has turned Zolver into some kind of human-empowered thrall. At those words, Camilla went pale, while Journey inwardly cursed. What's your status? Journey asked. I'm not dead yet. Litha's reply was the code word for I'm safe, whereas if he said something like, I'm fine, or everything is okay, it would mean that he needed help. Good. It's time to move to the next phase. Vampires are outstanding necromancers. If they are the ones behind the meat puppets, your little squabble may have tipped them off. We need to wrap this up quickly. She had all the troops surrounding the Lanza mansion prepare for action. Journey walked up to Hesse, Minna's personal housemaid, who was serving drinks and snacks at the tables. Inform the staff that it's time to serve dinner. Just like Minna's role had been to assemble the suspects, Hesse played an important part in dealing with the preparations. Leaving an empty room where Manohar could conduct his tests, allowing some of the troops to hide inside the mansion in case something went wrong, it all required the help of someone who knew the house's protocols to arrange things in a way that wouldn't alert the house staff. It was another calculated risk. Journey had no idea who she could trust, but both Minna and Hesse had a spotless past and had helped the investigation. Yes, your ladyship, Hesse replied while giving Journey a deep bow. Hesse was honored at the idea of helping the royal constable. Since their last conversation, Hesse's parents' neighborhood had become much safer. Also, she felt like one of the main characters from the books she borrowed from Lady Lanza. Once Minna heard Journey's order via the communication earpiece, her beautiful smile turned into a frown. "Are you sure you've checked them all already?" she asked with an expectant look. Unlike her dance partner, her mask was just a strip of silk with exotic plumes attached to it. "I examined them thrice." Manohar hissed, unable to hold his contempt anymore. He hadn't been humiliated so much since that time Marth had forced him to attend an academy's board meeting without giving him the freedom to speak or sleep. To escape from the clutches of that clingy harpy, he had managed to beat repeatedly his own spellcasting record, diagnosing multiple people at once every time the music stopped and Minna introduced him to her guests. "We are on a tight schedule. The fate of the world depends on this." He hoped to scare her, yet she giggled instead. "As you wish." She nodded. "We can continue this conversation later. Other has much to offer to a genius like yourself, and so do I." Her seductive smile and sensual voice would have melted Manohar's heart, if only he had won. "Yeah, and if I had a silver piece for every woman who said that to me, I'd be richer than the king." Her amiable mask crumbled for a split second before she regained her composure. Yet there was enough rage in her face to make him wince. Chapter 452. My esteemed guests. Minna's magically enhanced voice resounded through the ballroom. "I hope our master musicians have helped you to work up an appetite because our chefs have given their all to prepare our meal." The audience clapped at their host before moving to the adjacent room. Minna and Manohar approached Baron Max, who was hosting the meat puppet most likely to survive the extraction process along with its host. "Baron Max, my father would like to have a word in private. He is waiting for you in his office." She gave him a graceful curtsy before offering to accompany him. Minna held his arm while making small talk and giggling at every of the Baron replies. He didn't even notice Manohar walking a few steps behind them. The professor whispered one spell after the other to make sure the events with the first meat puppet wouldn't happen again. The Baron was so distracted by Minna's flirting that he didn't pay attention to his surroundings. There were many people waiting for him in the office, but Marquis Lanza wasn't among them. The moment they stepped inside, a mage from the association struck the back of Mox's neck with an enchanted club, making him faint. "Good. This will cut the connection with his master. Now make me some space." Manohar stepped forward and activated the Tier 5 spell Life Ward, enveloping all those present but the Baron with a thin layer of light magic that prevented their life forces from being affected by external sources. He had developed it to counter all those abilities similar to an abomination's touch, making it impossible for vampires or meat puppets to harm his mind or body respectively. Then he cast in rapid succession his diagnostic spell Third Eye and his split spell. They were both Tier 5 spells that Manohar had created when he was still a fifth-year student and had kept perfecting them every time he expanded his knowledge. The core of the spells was always the same, but Manohar had updated them so many times that if he bothered keeping track of all of their different versions, he would discover to have recently reached the triple digits. Third Eye was similar to Invigoration, allowing Manohar's mana to resonate with the patient's body. By shifting his focus whenever he perceived an anomaly, Manohar would obtain detailed information almost up to the cellular. Split was one of his most prized spells and the reason behind most of his achievements. A normal Tier 5 healer spell would use darkness magic to destroy diseased tissues and replace them with healthy ones. Split defied this logic. It used darkness magic to surgically cut the diseased tissues, or in this case the meat puppet, from the patient's body while nurturing them both. This way Manohar would heal the patient and collect a perfectly preserved sample to study afterward. Since Baron Max was unconscious and the vortex dormant, the whole process required less than a minute. The meat puppet screeched and squirmed while the professor pulled it out in one piece from the Baron's mouth. The puppet looked like a section of intestine, except it was full of throbbing veins which burst open and released dozens of small tentacles. The tentacles shape-shifted into small hands, clawing the air in an attempt to harm Manohar, but to no avail. His shield made of light prevented the infection, while his armor blocked the weak limbs. The thing then turned into a small head. Its blue eyes had just opened when the professor shoved it inside a darkened container which he promptly sealed with a spell. He ignored the retching sound the guards and Minna were producing while putting the magical jar in a bag. It was made of a thick black cloth, covered in runes which would prevent the puppeteer from locating the position of their minions. What in the gods' names is that thing? Who could be so evil to create such an abomination? Minna managed to say between barfs. Manohar was supposed to tell her to turn around, or at least to warn her about the nature of his task. Unluckily, all the time lost made him impatient and unwilling to cuddle a young miss's feelings. That which is done out of love is always beyond good and evil, and we mages do love our work. If you are done puking, your ladyship, I need to collect another specimen. Manohar said while casting a few cantrips that cleaned Minna's dress and made nausea disappear. Cursing her bad luck, Minna stepped outside the room and moved to their next target. That should be impossible. The one controlling the meat puppet couldn't believe their own eyes. Manohar managed to extract my puppy bypassing its self-destruct mechanism, keep it alive despite the lack of a host, and even sever our connection thanks to that bag. To add insult to the injury, this time he was even faster. Now I'm certain there is a flaw in my opus. Centuries of hard work ruined by a mere brat. I need to capture him alive and force him to reveal to me how can I fix this flaw. Even if I kill him, whoever inherits his legacy would still be a threat to me. It's time to get serious. Minna and Manohar approached Viscountess Ebla and lured her in the Marquis office. Everything went as predicted until the meat puppet was flushed out of its host. Unluckily, it had already a completely formed mouth, which allowed it to activate an array hidden inside the room. Manohar's focus was on the puppet. Keeping 3 Tier 5 spells was demanding even for him. When the creature triggered the trap, he was helpless against it just like Minna. Chains of lightning turned the room into a thunderstorm. Manohar managed to cast a few healing spells, but since it was made from the flesh of its master, the creature was immune to the lightning. It controlled the array with cruel precision, focusing the lightning bolts on the professor as soon as the others lost consciousness. This shouldn't be happening. I checked this room for arrays, he said while the array tormented his body. I know, the creature replied with a grin. That's why I placed it right after you left. Before fainting, Manohar could almost recognize that low, feminine voice. Almost. Journey and Lith were respectively keeping an eye on the guests and the Marquis office. When they heard screams of pain coming from the latter, they immediately shape-shifted their clothes into their much more comfortable uniform while running toward their destination. Secure the perimeter and send back up. Something went wrong, Before Journey could finish giving her orders via the communication earpiece, more screams ensued, but they came from the main hall. This time they were screams of fear. Journey and Lith turned around just in time to see all the remaining suspects with glowing blue eyes. The nobles' bodies expanded as they absorbed those near them and turned into a mass of bulging muscles. A dozen carpenters roared their challenge as they charged toward the Marquis office to protect their companion. We need help, and we need it yesterday. Chapter 453. Panic spread like wildfire in the main hall. The convened nobles screamed in terror at the sight of their peers, people that they had known for a lifetime, turning into hideous creatures. The bodies of the meat puppets' carriers burst through their clothes like inflated balloons. A single touch was all that it took them to assimilate those too close or too terrified to dodge their deformed limbs. Tista and Dorian had tried to destroy the creatures before they could become more than an overgrown lump of flesh. Unfortunately, when the nobles saw the bloated monsters rearrange their organs and muscles, terror turned into horror. Some fainted or remained frozen in place, but most of them ran away disregarding anyone's safety but their own. The frenzied crowd almost trampled the 2 mages and managed to slow down Lith's and Journey's reaction. Lith had no idea what had gone wrong. He, Manohar, and Journey had spent a long time preparing their plan, divulging information only on a need-to-know basis. Minna and Hesse only knew about the room, not what would take place there once the events were set in motion, and so did the guards from the association. Since it was a critical point of their plan and its only known weakness, Lith and Manohar had swept the office several times to make sure that no one would tamper with it. There's no way someone took down Manohar in a direct confrontation. This must be an inside job. Journey snarled while she stepped sideways to avoid being trampled by the runaway mob. Come to me. Lith said as spirit magic brought him the gatekeeper's sword from under the sofa where he had hidden it right before the gala started. After sheathing his blade, his hands quickly formed seals until he was enveloped by a thin layer of darkness. Is this spell as good as Manohar's? I'd be really impressed if you successfully imitated a Tier 5 spell after seeing it once only a few days ago, she said with a surprised tone. Not even close. He shook his head. It should still protect me from those things, and if they try to gobble me up, they are in for a nasty surprise. He replied. Their situation would have been much easier if not for the city array blocking dimensional items. They could only use what they had on them, and there was only so much normal pockets could store. Journey's needles weren't an issue, but wands, blades, and all kinds of magical tools couldn't be carried around without other people noticing them. The good news is that those guys are weak, Lith said while assessing their opponents with spirit magic and soulless mana sense. None of them is marked as a remarkable mage. They should be Magicos tops. The bad news is that we don't know what the heck is happening in the office, nor we can leave our back exposed. That's why I ordered to leave the association squads outside and let only the army in. We can't risk our mages getting assimilated and turned against us, Journey replied. The Carpenters had yet to finish their transformation when 4 5-man units of the army's elite squads burst through the windows and doors, unleashing a barrage of spells from their wands and staves. Being assaulted from every side, the creatures were immediately pushed on their back foot. The reason why each carpenter had assimilated only one guest was to be able to cast spells and attack at the same time without being burdened by dead weight. The bodies of the nobles were only trained to indulge in hedonistic pleasures. They had no value as mages or fighters. Forming a carpenter posed a heavy burden that those flaccid bodies were unable to sustain without constantly assimilating world energy. A third body would make them weaker rather than stronger. It would increase the energy expenditure without giving the creature any advantage. To sort out the best parts it would take time, and time was of the essence. All that mana flying through the room forced the puppeteer who was controlling the creatures to stop the vortexes, to prevent their creatures from self-destructing. Well. This time not only do I have to use half-baked pawns, but they are also made of trash materials. This should make things interesting. The puppeteer was actually grateful for Journey's tactical choice. Secrecy made things go much smoother, but after kidnapping Manohar, finesse was a waste of time. They could finally have some fun after months of boredom. The soldiers were all veterans who had been debriefed about all the enemy's known weaknesses and abilities. They kept their distance while using water spells to freeze and slow down their enemies. Without the vortex, and with their spells constantly interrupted, the Carpenters had only 2 choices: to stop and fight, or keep marching forward and be decimated. Faced with an impossible choice, the puppeteer had the creatures closer to the soldiers activate their vortex. It poisoned them, but at the same time, it jammed all the nearby magical tools and allowed the other creatures to safely assimilate world energy and regain their vigor. 3 carpenters fell to the ground as their first mana core collapsed due to mana poisoning. Thanks to their sacrifice, the remaining 9 reached as many soldiers and ripped them to shreds with the giant talons on their deformed limbs. Journey immediately understood that the enemy was turning the tables. The creatures on the front line were now jamming again the alchemical tools while the 3 fallen carpenters stood up the moment their second mana core activated and used the dying soldiers to replace the lost one. It took just over a second to switch from one core to the other, but on the battlefield, it was half a second too much. As soon as 3 more creatures collapsed after having lost their core, Tista struck them with a volley of plague arrows. Darkness magic was slow, but fast enough to hit the creatures before they recovered. With the crowd gone, she was finally able to take action while Dorian got those who were still paralyzed by fear to safety. Her spell ate through their flesh and corrupted the energies that kept their makeshift bodies together. 3 carpenters were down due to mana poisoning, while 3 more were helpless because of the plague arrows. With their numbers reduced to half, the rhythm of the enemy's attack was disrupted long enough to allow the soldiers to retreat and regroup. Lith exploited the temporary ceasefire to jump in the middle of the creature's formation and activate the Death Call spell he had cast earlier. Fire couldn't be used in such an enclosed space. There was no earth to manipulate, and water magic had proved to be ineffective. Tista's darkness spell, instead, worked like a charm, making Lith doubt again about what kind of magic could give life to the carpenters. Are they a cross between undead and flesh, or is just darkness magic being that good? He thought. After his fight with the orcs, Lith had modified the spell to make it more effective in close range. Instead of tentacles, the layer of darkness surrounding his body took the form of 4 arms that clawed at the nearby monsters like ravenous beasts. Chapter 454. The ethereal limbs pierced through 4 different carpenters, incapacitating them, and throwing the puppeteer's strategy in disarray. With their line of fire clear, the soldiers focused their spells on the 10 fallen creatures, killing 8 of them in one fell swoop. Now that they outnumbered and outmatched the creatures, the soldiers had no problem dealing with the remaining carpenters on their own. Lith activated Life Vision to check what was happening inside the Marquis office before deciding what was the best course of action. Manohar's and Minna's life forces were still active, which made him sigh in relief. A purple core carpenter is the last thing I want to see. I wonder why whoever captured them didn't escape while we were dealing with those flesh bags. Lith thought. I can answer that. Solus replied after assessing the situation with Mana Sense. I can sense 2 more carpenters in there, and they belong to a completely different league compared to the ones we faced before. Not only did they assimilate mages instead of nobles, but they are also taking their sweet time to arrange their bodies in the best possible way. With each second we are wasting here, they're getting stronger and more efficient. Did someone escape the perimeter? Journey asked via her communication earpiece. Negative. We have captured and quarantined all those who came out of the house. A female voice replied. This means we have a huge problem. Journey said to the rest of the team. If there was someone capable of defeating Manohar fair and square, they would have already left the room and rampaged their way out of here. So, either there is a secret passage leading outside of which we are unaware of. That's impossible. Lith interrupted her. He needed to make haste. Otherwise, based on Solus's readings, soon the carpenters would become so strong that he wouldn't be able to defeat them without revealing his abilities. I didn't trust the Marquis word nor the house's blueprints. Both Manohar and I searched the room with earth magic. No secret passages. Or they are still holed up in there, waiting for us to fall into their trap. Journey nodded, surprised by his unusual unrest. I can't think of many ways to take down a member of the Queen's Corps that fast. The most likely hypotheses are a traitor in our midst, an array, or both. We can deal with a traitor by shooting down whoever is still conscious, but an array is another story entirely. Lith snorted in exasperation while walking toward the office and chanting the array detecting spell. Solus. He trusted her mana sense much more than a basic warden spell. No array aside from those which protect the house. There is a strong residual mana, but it could be either because of Manohar's spells or from whatever has been used to stun him. Nothing. I still think it's a trap. You guys remain here and prepare for the worst. Lith took a multicolored potion from one of his pockets and drank it in one gulp. It was a top-grade alchemical concoction that temporarily boosted its user's physical abilities to a magical beast level. Lith didn't really need it, but it allowed him to use fusion magic without arousing suspicions. The moment Lith was about to touch the door's handle, a huge clawed hand the size of a table pierced the hardwood up to its roots. Lith's chest would have suffered the same fate if he hadn't kept Life Vision active the whole time. Dodging the attack with fusion magic had been easy. Pretending to be unaware of the danger, not so much. He jumped back at the last second as a completely formed carpenter charged out of the room, quickly followed by a second one. They were different from those Lith had faced before. They were humanoid creatures, around 2.5 meters, 8 feet 2 inches, tall, with a blood-red skin. They had extra mouths on both their abdomen and left shoulder. For a second, Lith thought they had some kind of blue halo around their head, before realizing they were a series of glowing eyes which allowed the creatures to see in every direction at all times. Those bodies are unnatural, Lith thought. They reminded him of Gadorf the Wyvern's human appearance. Not even by using 2 like me as building materials, they could have muscles so thick and bones so strong. These carpenters are the result of body sculpting. The first carpenter opened his left palm, releasing a fireball at point blank. Once again, Life Vision saved Lith's skin. Even if none of the creatures' mouths were moving, Lith had seen the mana amassing on its hand and moved accordingly. The blazing sphere missed its primary target and hit in the middle of the group. Lith's companions managed to dodge only because they were distant enough from the caster to have the time to react. Tista used air fusion to come out of it unscathed, while Journey was caught by the fringes of the explosion despite her timely jump. She had to roll to disperse the momentum. Dorian did the same, but without her training, the shockwave sent him crashing against a wall. Son of a gun, Lith thought as he extended his right hand and pretended to use the spells stored inside his rings, while actually unleashing the true spells he had ready. He aimed the fireball so that if I dodged it, the spell would not go to waste. We must avoid lining up. A barrage of air blades struck where the major arteries were supposed to be, while lightning bolts bombarded the carpenter's chest. They were supposed to turn it into a charred corpse, or worst-case scenario to stun it long enough for the plague arrows behind them to cripple its strength. Lith felt his life was becoming a play about Murphy's Law when anything that could go wrong did go wrong. The air blade cut the carpenter's flesh to the bone, nearly chopping off its legs and head. Unluckily, not only did just trickle of blood spurt from such deep wounds, but also the cuts were so clean that regenerating them took the creature less than the blink of an eye. The lightning bolts struck their target, leaving behind only blackened dots as proof of their brief existence. The cuts and the bolts' combined effects locked the creature into place, preventing it from dodging the plague arrows. The carpenter used its giant right hand to intercept the darkness spells, swatting them like they were flies. The flesh on the limb rotted and fell, revealing that the hand was composed mostly of bones. The carpenter activated its vortex. It both helped the creature to counter the plague arrow's effects before the hand could fell off and left Solus astonished. This is really bad. A fully formed carpenter can use both of its cores at once, she explained as the creature waved its healthy hand and unleashed the Tier 4 War Mage spell chasing lightning. 5 bolts of electricity came out of its fingers, with each lightning resembling a snake in both motions and appearance. Lith knew that dodging them was pointless. As their name implied, they wouldn't let go of their prey. What does it mean? Lith replied while setting up his defense and sending invisible strands of spirit magic against the vortex to poison it. It means that the vortex is located in the secondary core, so even if you corrupt it with your mana, the carpenter can still use it to accumulate a mother lode of world energy until the auxiliary core crumbles. Chapter 455. These creatures are unstoppable war machines. Solus explained. Even without the vortex, by using 2 cores at once it's like they have 1 core of superior purity. With the vortex, the core purity is upgraded twice, and they have the same effects of a full elemental fusion. To make things worse, the double core synergy allows them to ignore the mana poisoning effect as long as the secondary core holds. Basically, it works like a filter. It protects the main core by tanking the foreign mana while the creature uses the vortex to accumulate loads of world energy. This way, even when the second core crumbles, the carpenter can keep fighting at full strength for an extended period of time. Lith cursed the enemy's ingenuity while activating Earth Fusion to block most of the damage from the 5 incoming chasing lightning and light fusion to heal his wounds the moment they opened. Luckily, the War Mage spell was slow enough to allow Lith to intercept 2 lightning bolts with his Earth Magic infused Gatekeeper. It wasn't as good as a stone wall, but it was the next best thing. Lith felt a sting when the blade and the bolts clashed, but nothing more. He gritted his teeth ready to tank the other 3, yet nothing happened. 3 enchanted needles were stuck in front of him. They drew the incoming spell as if they were lightning rods and grounded their energy, making it harmless. The other one is escaping. Journey pointed at the second carpenter, which was walking upstairs double time towards the balcony. It held in its huge hands the limp bodies of Manohar and Minna. I don't feel like turning my back to something capable of silent casting. Litha's voice oozed sarcasm. He had yet to understand how the carpenter had timely produced a Tier 4 spell out of the blue. Solus. No clue. Their cores have a static flow, so they aren't awakened. That's all I know. Tista took off with a flight spell, taking advantage of the ballroom high ceiling while none of the carpenters seemed to pay her any attention. Not so fast, little girl. The carpenter's voice was a low rumble, like an echo coming from a deep cave. Its thin lips formed a cruel smile, and his voice was amused, like a child who had just received a new toy. The creature was incredibly nimble despite its size. It leaped with inhuman strength to intercept her with its clawed hand while the other was set ablaze, ready to unleash the Tier 4 spell Scorching Blast. Tista grinned in reply. She reversed the carpenter's gravity and turned its jump into a head-first dive into the ceiling. Both the claw and the spell missed their intended targets with a wide margin. Gravity magic? The creature's surprise turned into shock when Lith and Tista combined their efforts, reversing the gravity around the creature again and amplifying it by 10 times as the carpenter plummeted to the ground. Even with its enhanced physique, such a huge body already exerted a huge strain on its joints due to its height and weight. Between the fall and the artificial gravity, the carpenter's kneecaps shattered even though it had conjured an air cushion at the last second to lessen the impact. Tista left Journey and Lith to deal with the crippled monster as she darted toward the second carpenter to prevent its escape. The joyful expression on both creatures' faces disappeared as their plan was suddenly taking a turn for the worse. The rest of the team had drunk the same potion Lith did before approaching the Marquis office. This allowed Dorian to recover in a matter of seconds from an impact that otherwise would have knocked him out and Journey to circle around the enemy with the speed of a cheetah. These things have eyes even on the back of their heads. I know that I can't perform a sneak attack, but there's something I need to verify, she thought. One of the advantages of not taking part in a fight was the possibility to calmly observe the events like they were nothing more than a game. Since Solas's magical abilities were usually negligible against Litha's opponents, her role had always been to analyze the enemies and use the collected information to help him devise the best strategy. Those earlier cuts bled too little. Solas and Journey reasoned as one. The anatomy of these things must be completely different from a human's. If I were in their maker's place, I'd put their vitals in places hard to reach during a fight. The 2 needles in her hands shape-shifted into curved knives as she approached the enemy's back in what seemed to be a cut-throat attack. From the other side of the creature, Lith had finished casting Death Call again. For arms made of darkness energy emerged from his body and enveloped the carpenter's limbs while he aimed for its head. With one hand, he executed a horizontal slash with the gatekeeper to cut all the eyes at once, while the other shoot a volley of plague arrows to the torso. Without its legs, the carpenter couldn't dodge both attacks at once. Not with Journey timing her attack to match Litha's. Their coordination was so good that it was hard to believe it was an improvised maneuver. Yet instead of panicking, the creature smiled again. The kid is good for his age, but that's it, the puppeteer thought. With all of his fancy spells and weapons, he thinks he has won already. He doesn't realize that no matter how good a potion is, he can't exploit its full potential. Having the abilities of a magical beast doesn't mean knowing how to use them. They can use about 50% of their new capabilities without them becoming a burden. Unlike them, I don't need to get accustomed to this body's prowess, nor to worry about the aftereffects. It's way weaker than mine, and it's only disposable trash. Sometimes I wonder if Balkir used my work as a template for his undead. The vortex suddenly activated at full force, dispelling both Death Call and the plague arrows, leaving Lith exposed to a counterattack. The carpenter's first mana core tanked the damage while the world energy brought the second one to a purple core level strength. At the same time, 2 humanoid arms previously camouflaged by the creature's bulging muscles emerged from its back, revealing how all the space where kidneys and liver were supposed to be was actually empty. The arms completed the last hand sign before moving to intercept Journey's hands. She managed to step back at the last second, avoiding her wrists getting crushed, but she was too close to completely dodge the stream of lightning that appeared at point blank. The carpenter's grin grew wider as the ice spikes it had conjured appeared behind the stumbling constable and turned her into a pincushion. To add insult to the injury, the first set of arms ignored Litha's sword and lunged their bone claws to his sides. At the same time, the mouth on the carpenter's abdomen opened and released a jet stream of purple flames. It was just another Tier 3 spell, but the vortex boosted its destructive power to the extreme. Chapter 456. The lightning bolt had squeezed the air out of Journey's lungs and pushed her back, while her body still refused to obey her. Her constable armor coupled with the potion's effects had taken the brunt of the damage, but pain radiated from the point of impact, turning every movement into agony. Yet pain was an old friend to her, something Journey had got used to ever since her family had trained her to inflict and withstand torture before she even turned 10. Pain was what allowed her to regain control of her limbs. The ice spikes barely managed to pierce her skin before she pivoted on the balls of her feet to redirect the momentum of her fall to the side and roll to safety. Lith was having it much worse than her. The city array prevented him to blink while the carpenter's vortex was close enough to rob him of his magic aside from fusion magic. His rings were useless. He couldn't fly or use spirit magic to pull himself away. Lith had to choose between being turned into a kebab, a charred corpse, or both. He chose the fourth option, the one he created. Lith jumped back and to the side, putting himself willingly in front of the closest of the enemy's clawed hands. With one hand on the blade's hilt and the other on its flat side, Lith used the earth magic-infused gatekeeper as a shield against the enemy's middle finger. It was the longest and the closest one among those forming the spear-like hand which was darting at him with the speed of a freight train. It was also the most dangerous one, aimed at his heart. Lith used the force of the impact to propel himself away from the spell and the other hand. What he couldn't expect was that the remaining 3 fingers dislocated themselves, becoming long enough to reach his head, abdomen, and left leg respectively. Lith was still in mid-air after parrying the middle finger. He couldn't dodge while his magic was still sealed. Cursing at the enemy's wits, he could only tilt his head sideways to avoid the deadly tap at his forehead. The puppeteer laughed at his feeble attempt. The incoming spearhead wasn't a mindless projectile, but one of their fingers. Carpenters couldn't feel pain. Receptors were among the many things they had discarded to make their strength as explosive as their lifespan was short. The carpenter's forefinger followed Lith's movements, striking him on his right temple as the other 2 phalanges pierced his body. Blood spurted from Lith's stomach and left thigh. Yet the moment his clenched muscles stopped the fingers, the darkness magic-infused gatekeeper performed a circular motion that cut all 4 of them almost down to the knuckles. Ravaged by the chaotic energies, the creature's secondary core and its fingers collapsed at the same time, reducing its battle strength considerably. It's impossible. Suddenly the puppeteer had nothing to laugh about. I know that a wound caused by the tip of one phalanx is bound to be shallow, but even a few centimeters deep hole in the head is supposed to be deadly. Yet there wasn't even a bruise on Lith's forehead. Only a curved stone plate that had deflected the projectile and reduced the impact to an oversized finger flick. "Are you all right, Solus?" Lith asked as the plate turned liquid and hid under his clothes again. "Nothing that a bit of rest can't heal," she replied. "Our combined earth fusion did most of the work, otherwise I would be shattered in pieces." The carpenter roared in outrage. Its kneecaps were healed, but both of his prey were alive and well. The puppeteer couldn't believe that the body and techniques they had perfected after centuries of training couldn't get rid of 2 newborns, not even after being forced to go all out. "Our enemy has lost one hand and its secondary core. Without the vortex, its remaining core is a cyan one. With the vortex, it can reach the output of a blue one, but if it gets poisoned too, the carpenter's strength will plummet," Solus explained. Lith smiled in reply, while weaving a new set of spells that he knew the enemy couldn't risk absorbing anymore. Journey kept her distance and circled around the creature, with Lith quickly following her lead. 3 mouths, 3 spells at once. Even though the second set of arms was hidden again in the creature's sides, Journey was certain that they were forming hand signs non-stop. Now that they had been exposed, the quiet mumblings coming from the jaws on the carpenter's abdomen and shoulders explained the trick behind its silent casting. Fake mages could delay the activation of their spells until their focus was broken, just like an awakened. Hand signs required less time than most chants, but a normal mage would make them last as long as the chanting to perform them with accuracy. Yet the carpenter had several mouths, so while one chanted, the others would make noises to cover the incoming spell and start the next one as soon as the first set of hand signs was completed. The creature tried to escape from the encirclement, but it discovered that the duo could follow its movements with ease. Journey's air-infused needles pierced its 4 limbs while Lith's magic froze and deformed the marble floor at its feet, turning the carpenter's footwork into a mess. Journey then activated several wands at once, releasing a barrage of lightning bolts that could sweep the whole ballroom. The puppeteer thought that she had gone mad. They only needed to make the creature crouch to dodge what looked like the spell of an angered thunder god and make Lith its new target. Their coordination was too perfect. They were always at the opposing sides of the carpenter, making it easy to exploit any incoming spell and turn it against the other human. Lith ignored the incoming thunderstorm and released a volley of plague arrows, leaving the creature twice dumbfounded. Is he insane? He'll take the constable's attack head-on, whereas I only need a roll to escape from such a slow spell. The puppeteer was disappointed. Their prey were clearly panicking, turning what was supposed to be a fun game into a farce. The lightning bolts curved sharply, following the four needles like the remote tracking devices they were. Even with multiple layers of body fat shielding the nerves, the electrical current was so violent that it caused a seizure in all four limbs. The carpenter found itself paralyzed, so none of the plague arrows missed its target. The dark energies spread like a disease, eating away the creature's physical and magical strength. Its focus was lost, and so were all the spells it had prepared. Refusing to accept their loss, the puppeteer activated the vortex to escape from the trap and kill both those pests by burning away all the lifespan their creature had left. Much to their surprise, even in its boosted state, the creature was unable to deal a lethal blow. Journey and Lith were both able to follow the carpenter's speed with ease. While normal humans under the effect of a potion were fast, they were fast and graceful. While any other human opponent the puppeteer had ever faced was just strong, they were strong and feral. I was wrong. They can use the potion's effect to its maximum, if not even more. These guys move more like beasts than humans. The puppeteer's heart was filled with joy and awe. Finding two worthy opponents outshined even Lith's blades, slowing their prized creature long enough for Journey's long knives to stab it in the ass, right where its brain was hidden, and send it into oblivion. Chapter 457. From her hiding spot in the lounge on the first floor, Camilla had been watching the fight from the beginning. Her feelings changed from awe to horror and back with each second. Thank heavens Constable Ernest sent me away the moment the last phase of the plan started. Otherwise I would have been a burden for them. I always dreamt of becoming a royal constable one day, but if Lady Ernest is their standard, I'd rather remain behind my desk for life. She thought. What Camilla was unaware of was that Journey was considered a monster even among the royal constables. They were mainly investigators, prosecutors, and interrogators. Most of them wouldn't take part in a single fight their whole lives. Journey's family, the Myrock household, had a different philosophy on the matter. Regardless of the profession one of its members would choose, they would all be trained as assassins to get rid of bad apples whenever the crown required their assistance. While Journey and Lith dealt with the first carpenter, Tista and Dorian did their best to stop the second one from running away with the two hostages. While they had the advantage that the creature couldn't use its hands unless it dropped Manohar and Minna, the situation was still dire. The trick of the second set of arms hidden in the creature's sides had yet to be revealed, so they were still worried about its silent casting abilities. Tista had no gatekeeper for close combat, and even if she did, she wouldn't know how to use it. She had been an awakened for less than a year. Her body was only slightly better than a normal human's. She knew few true magic spells that she could use during combat, and had no solace to help her plan ahead. What a mess. She inwardly cursed. I can't use fire or lightning without risking injuring the hostages. If I use the marble on the floor, the house might collapse, and darkness magic is so frigging slow. I'll have to use water and spirit magic. Tista kept life vision active while accumulating a densely packed sphere of spirit magic. Her plan was to poison the creature as soon as it activated its vortex, and then stall for time until it fainted due to the loss of one of its cores. She had no idea how different a perfectly formed carpenter was compared to the makeshift version she had previously slain. Tista cast a hail of ice spikes, all aimed at the creature's legs and at the pavement. The puppeteer had no troubles controlling the two carpenters at once, and hoped this duo would prove to be as fun as the other one. The creature dodged the spikes with the grace of a ballerina. Tista's attempts to avoid hitting the hostages made their trajectory obvious, or so the puppeteer thought. Some of the spikes melted on impact, while others froze the water, turning the floor into an extremely slippery surface composed of water and ice. The carpenter lost its footing as Dorian used an earth spell to make the stairs collapse and force the enemy to choose between releasing the hostages or going back to square one. The creature smirked in amusement at the trap and refused to fall. A simple floating spell allowed it to walk on air unhindered by their efforts. These guys are disappointing, the puppeteer thought. They clearly don't have any close combat ability, otherwise they'd try to exploit my alleged lack of arms. Or maybe they are just too scared I will use their friends as shields. Their train of thought was interrupted when the other carpenter failed to kill either of its targets despite going all out. Enough playing. Time to get out of here. The creature activated the vortex at full power and its best flying spell. Tista didn't miss the opportunity and struck the enemy with all the spirit magic she had amassed up to that point. The creature's secondary core crumbled almost instantly, leaving the puppeteer as surprised as they were angry. One of their masterpieces was being beaten into submission. They couldn't allow the other one to be lost too. The carpenter darted head first toward the balcony, with Tista in hot pursuit feeding poison to the vortex. The creature stopped abruptly, letting her come close enough to disrupt her flight spell, and kicked her hard while she was unable to defend herself. Dorian tried to catch her, but was struck along with Tista by powerful lightning that would have made him faint if not for the potion coursing through his veins. He swallowed down the pain along with all of his fears and kept moving. Dorian broke her fall along with several of his ribs. Tista was a lithe girl, but the kick in her armor made her an enchanted cannonball. They both tumbled on the ground while the carpenter flew away at an almost subsonic speed, burning its lifespan to get to its destination before its core crumbled. The sound of cracking bones broke the silence in the ballroom, reaching even Camilla's hiding spot. It reminded her of when she was still a child, and her brother added wood to the fire. The contrast between her happy memory and the sight of her two companions lying on the floor made her shiver. She waited, for a time that seemed to last an eternity, hoping to see at least one of them stand up. Please, gods, let them be okay. She silently prayed with all the faith she could muster. They are good people, servants of the kingdom trying to save lives. I'm just an analyst who can't even lift a box full of paperwork. I can't help them. I'm useless. The carpenter unleashed 5 lightning bolts at Lith, and Camilla's heart almost stopped. She could almost see his body sprawling on the floor in a seizure. Tears streamed down her face as he and Journey blocked the spell, making her fear grow even stronger. Please, save them. Camilla kept praying while a small pool of blood was leaking out the mouths of the 2 fallen mages. I'm not even a mage. I'm just human. Monsters walk among us. Please, don't let them die. I don't want to be alone again. Yet aside from the clash of bone and metal, no answer came to her pleas. Before she could realize what she was doing, Camilla was rushing towards her companions. The voice of her drill sergeant echoed in her ears, scolding her at every step. You're too slow, move that ass. Stumble as much as you want, you crippled maggot. You'll fail them like you failed everything else in your life, and their deaths will be on you. Why the fuck aren't you using cover? Sergeant Hartman's voice was cruel, but helpful. She finally remembered that her dress was special. Camilla had never had an enchanted item aside from communicator amulets, so her memory lapse was understandable. Yet she cursed herself while its shape shifted to her uniform, and she used the toppled tables to hide her movements. She reached Tista and Dorian, checking their vitals before administering healing potions to them. If their bodies are too weakened, the healing process could kill them. Her brain stopped as the creature sent Journey to the spikes-filled floor and cornered Lith with a 3-pronged attack. What scared her the most wasn't the flash of spells nor the splashes of blood. It was the savage smile of the 3 monsters amid the chaos. It made her feel like the last human on Mogar, forced to witness a battle between gods. Chapter 458. Camilla quickly snapped out of her reverie and made Tista slowly drink a healing potion. She was the more gravely injured of the 2 and needed immediate assistance. Camilla checked her pulse between gulps to make sure that Tista's body could handle the strain. Once the bleeding stopped and Tista's heartbeat became steady, Camilla took care of Dorian. A few seconds later, the carpenter was dead and Lith rushed to her side. Remember to chant. We don't know who could be watching. Solus warned him before he could forget to keep up his act in his worry. Treating 2 people at once was already something unheard of, Doing it with silent magic would have been beyond stupid. Litha's chant was a streak of English swear words as his hands performed random gestures before he activated invigoration on both Tista and Dorian. Contrary to Camilla's expectations, he was the one in the worst shape. Even though she had received a full force attack from a carpenter, her awakened body amplified the potion's effectiveness and reduced the life force consumption the healing process required. Damn it. Both arms have compound fractures, cracked and splintered ribs, punctured lungs, internal bleeding, ruptured organs, second-degree burns from lightning, lacerations, and a concussion. Those are not injuries, but a fucking grocery list. Lith inwardly cursed while he used Tier 4 true magic to heal their bodies and replenish their life force. The abundant energy from the respiration technique brought color back to their pale complexion. Camilla had no time to rejoice. She noticed 2 brown stains on his chest and left leg that were slowly getting bigger as the red of his blood mixed with the green of his ranger uniform. The holes in the fabric had yet to self-repair. Even though light fusion had almost stopped the bleeding, the wounds looked pretty nasty. Camilla was about to splash a potion on his injuries to make them heal when Journey caught her wrist. Right move, but wrong moment, Lieutenant. If Lith loses his focus due to the combined exhaustion from the fight, his wounds, and the potion, these 2 could need days instead of hours to recover. I'm sorry, Constable. It's just. Camilla didn't know what to say. Her eyes moved from the potion in her hand to Litha's open wounds. She inwardly cursed the gods and herself for being utterly useless. First time on the battlefield, Journey sat beside her. A flick of the royal constable's wrist made all the needles scattered throughout the room return to her pockets. Camilla nodded, biting her lower lip in worry. Whatever Lith was doing, the effort was draining color from his face by the second. Healing was much harder than destroying. Even invigoration had its limits. Well, it's normal to worry about the people we like. Normal and a bit rude, Journey said, drawing Camilla's gaze on herself. I may not be as young and sexy as he is in your eyes, but I'm wounded nonetheless. Journey took the potion from Camilla's hand and gulped it down. It was only then that Camilla saw the scorch mark on Journey's chest and her bleeding back. Oh gods, I'm so sorry. Relax. I was joking. Journey cut her short with a laugh. You did a good job keeping them alive. With no specimens, Manohar gone, and no more suspects to interrogate, at least no one died. That's all that matters. Camilla grimaced and pointed at the bloody mess in the main hall. Bits of nobles, soldiers, and carpenters were splattered on the walls. I mean, none of us. You can't save them all. Do this job long enough, and you'll learn that small victories are what lets you keep moving forward. If you focus on the losses, you'll go crazy in no time. Later, back at the association headquarters, everyone was eating like there was no tomorrow. Sharing life force with someone prevented them from dying, but they still needed to replenish all the nutrients spent to reconstruct bones and mend flesh. Tista had used invigoration to replenish Dorian's and Journey's strength, so that Lith would have some time to rest, and all the members of the group were back at their peak physical condition. Psychologically, aside from Lith and Journey, they were a worried mess. Tista kept reviewing her fight with the carpenter in an endless loop. Every repetition only made her more bothered. That's what they mean by, don't bite more than you can chew. If that thing wasn't in a hurry because of the mana poisoning, it could have killed us both. I need to learn more offensive spells before starting my travels. There's no such thing as a second chance in a fight. How did you know that thing had an ass for brains? Lith asked. It was actually obvious. Journey replied. It didn't flinch when you aimed at its head, and the torso is always the biggest target available. Legs and arms were a no-go. Big muscles like that need space to flex. Since the second set of arms took almost all of the lower back, where else could it be? We're screwed. Dorian said once his stomach had finally stopped grumbling. Not only has the investigation hit a dead end, but we have also lost Manohar, maybe for good. Things couldn't get any worse. That's not true. Journey shook her head. Count Zolver still has a lot of explaining to do. Before we had nothing on him, but this evening he both assaulted a ranger and illegally accessed his personal file. The Crown has given me free rein on the matter. How did he get his hands on my file? Litha's eyes brimmed with rage. The creep had made things personal one time too many. Not your real file, just the one we leave available to known corrupt officers. Journey explained. It only contains public information and enough details to make it look authentic. That way we can use it to track their contractors and anticipate their moves. So far, someone has requested classified information on all of us the moment the investigation started. I didn't tell you because we failed to track the delivery. Litha's file has been accessed again this evening, right after his quarrel with the Count. We failed to track the delivery again, but the timing is too suspicious. The Crown prefers to ruffle some medium-importance noble's feathers rather than risk losing the kingdom's two best diagnosticians at once. This would be fantastic news, if not for Zolver disappearing right after leaving the Marquis mansion. None of the men stationed outside his house have seen him for hours. Also, there is no record about this Kalarn guy. It's another dead end. Maybe it is, and maybe not. Lith would have liked to steeple his fingers while thinking, but Camilla's hand was stuck to his like a boot on a car. Listening to his reports was one thing. Watching him risk his life several times in a single night was another. I have a contact in the undead community that might be able to help us. Why didn't you tell us that as soon as you arrived? Withholding information during a royal investigation is a crime. Dorian was grateful to Lith for saving his life, but not enough to forget about their shared duty. Because we had no solid lead. I never believed it was the work of a necromancer, and I still don't. Even if I'm wrong, undead doesn't equal necromancy. Take Balkier, for example. Also, what was I supposed to ask? For a list of all the undead in the region? Only after tonight's events do I have a name and a description. I wouldn't even risk exposing her existence if we weren't clutching at straws. Her, Journey, Tista, and Camilla frowned at the word, each for her own reasons. Chapter 459. Lith couldn't forgive Zolver for messing with him twice. The idea of becoming the next royal healer if something happened to Manohar was a strong motivator too. He valued his freedom as much as the mad professor did. Lith took out his communication amulet and pressed Kala's rune. The White's hologram appeared instantly. Hello, Scourge. How many times do I have to tell you to use my human name? He said in exasperation, afraid that more misunderstandings could ensue. Fine. Hello, Shadow of Death. To what do I owe this call? That's not my human name either. I wouldn't be so sure. Journey and Kala said in unison. Seeing an undead bear instead of a woman put both Journey and Camilla at ease. Tista was still wondering why her brother had never told her about this particular friend of his. What do you mean, I wouldn't be so sure? Lith asked. It all started as a moniker Nana used to refer to you with the association after you killed Garth Rankin and his father. Journey explained. After the plague, wherever you go someone coincidentally dies or bad things happen. So it stuck. People consider me bad luck. Lith was astonished. He could almost hear Camilla thinking about it was only after dating him that she had got dragged in that mess by Commander Barrion. To be fair, it was just his paranoia speaking. Only the envious ones. Camilla said without leaving his hand. Those who speak behind your back and think that your achievements aren't enough to justify the prestige you hold in the eyes of the crown. Your potential enemies refer to you as such too. Kala said. Scarlet told me that's how the underworld refers to you. Human and not. Ever since you killed that wyvern. Anyway, what can I do for you? Kala was still recovering from the injury she had self-inflicted on her life force. Being unable to further her research, she was bored to death and eager for a distraction. Lith told her everything that was happening in Other before describing her Kalarn and his vassal. Whatever it is, it's not necromancy. Kala spoke with the same certainty she had that the sun would rise in the morning. The blue eyes are simply a side effect of a partial consciousness transfer from the maker to their creation. Judging from your description, it seems like a twisted version of light magic. You are looking for someone who alters the life force of the living rather than reanimates corpses. The two disciplines have one common feature, though. They both deal with the research for the perfect immortality. A human named Arton Griffin conducted thorough research on the matter. As far as I know, his only achievement was to set the very definition of forbidden magic. Isn't that the same guy you thought resembled the god of healing Zhao? Dorian asked. He knew the Mad King's name only because of the nursery rhymes his mother used to scare him with whenever he misbehaved as a kid. Yes, Dorian. He is, but I don't think it's wise to waste our time with trivia. I can only imagine that our enemy will rush their plans. They have Manohar and are aware we discovered their backers' network. It's only a matter of time before they flee. Lith replied. Ardhan was barely a footnote in the kingdom's history books. His name was forgotten, and his legacy lost to all those without the highest clearance level. Unbeknownst to all those in the room, Ardhan had been the very first god of healing. To quickly find a great number of test subjects for his experiments, he had established a free health system that lasted until his plan was exposed. It saved millions of lives, and the people worshipped him like a savior. The clerics of Zal thought to ride the king's coattails by reshaping the statues of the ancient god in his image, hoping to draw the masses back to their temple. Their plan royally backfired, becoming the last nail in the coffin for most religions. By the way, who are these people? Being interrupted twice made the bored wight curious about the nature of her audience. Don't worry, Kala. They are all good humans. Lith replied to the implied question if they were or not fellow awakened ones. As I was saying, you are not facing necromancy. At the same time, it's unlikely for the local undead community to not be involved in the matter or at least know a good deal about it. Many disappearances make feeding and hiding much harder. Whenever something bad happens, people always blame curses first and undead later. They are the perfect scapegoat, and once panic spreads, even eccentric normal people who like wearing a mask or prefer nightlife become targets. Plus, I heard multiple times about projects aimed to build meat puppets to allow undead with an unpleasant appearance to have a normal life, or just to experience the sunlight again. Some need it for business reasons, others because they are unhappy with their limits. I'm not the only one researching for a cure for undeath. What you are describing sounds like a perfect temporary fix. Maybe I can point you in the right direction, but it's going to be dangerous. How much do you know about the undead? Only enough to recognize them and kill them if necessary. Lith admitted. Most of the knowledge about greater undead was classified. He had never wasted precious merits to learn things that Kala could teach him for free. Such a narrow perspective. She shook her head in disappointment. I'll keep it short. Sentient undead are divided into 3 courts, based on their standpoint on the living. The Dawn Court, the only one I have a connection with, respects all kinds of life forms. Be they humans, plants, or beasts, the Dawn Court regards them as creatures that, despite being weak and short-lived, can still be worthy of the gift of eternal life. They do not take slaves, are patrons of the arts, and don't kill while feeding unless strictly necessary. Just like the royal court, the Dawn Court is ruled by a king and a queen. They are by no means related by nuptial vows or even race and are often at odds with each other to further their own power plays. The Dawn Court is not content with survival. They want to enjoy their existence. The royals are elected every year among those who brought more prosperity to the court, be it in terms of wealth, social connections, or safe havens. Most of those who became undead against their will and wish to retain, if not to regain, their old lifestyle seek asylum among their ranks. The Dust Court are just loners who grouped up to not get harassed or disturbed by other courts. As long as they are left alone, they don't care about the living. Their feeding and social habits are unpredictable. They have no leader nor a rigid structure. They assemble only when one or more of their members is threatened. They are the most difficult court to contact or deal with. If attacked, they don't bargain, nor do they seek compensation. They retaliate until their enemy is destroyed. Most liches belong to the Dust Court. Chapter 460. The Night Court despises the living. They consider them just like humans consider their food. Inferior sentient beings, a lesser ring in the food chain, or 2 steps behind on the evolutionary scale if you prefer. They only value power and rank themselves like an army rather than a court. A general keeps his authority only as long as he is capable of defending it. They believe that the end always justifies the means, making betrayals and conspiracies the norm. They are their own worst enemy. Their only rule is to not kill among themselves, otherwise their numbers could be counted on one hand in less than a week. To them, birthing an offspring only means to create more rivals, so they don't share the gift of undeath easily. Unlike the Dawn Court that mingles with nobles, artists, and politicians, Night Court members are usually active members of the human underworld. With its human trade, drug trafficking, and weapon dealing, the black market allows them to hide in plain sight, to obtain what they want and get away with it. They like to befriend corrupt nobles and officials. Such people are the perfect straw men to take care of their business during the day and the perfect fall guys in case something goes wrong. What's a vassal? Lith asked. For the Dawn Court, a potential new recruit. For the Dusk Court, a friend. For the Night Court, a means to an end. Some undead, like the vampires, can bestow their gifts to the living, allowing them to temporarily surpass their limits. Becoming a vassal means to be a willing servant, but it's also the first step to become a greater undead. Don't get me wrong, none of the courts are absolutely good or bad, just like there are not only good or bad humans. Their philosophy on most things may be different, but they are all predators. Ancient and powerful beings that have no mercy, killing whoever can expose their existence or ruin centuries of hard work. I don't know anyone in other, but I think I can still put you in contact with members of the Dawn Court. They will act friendly because of my backing, but to them, you are still a living and a stranger, hence disposable. Don't worry, he is not going there alone. We'll have his back, Journey said with a steel gaze while placing her hand on Litha's shoulder. No, you won't. They'll never accept so many strangers at once, and even if they did, it would be a death trap. Once inside their territory, you would be forced to abide to their rules or die. Exposing themselves to you is a big risk that would demand compensation. One favor is all they need to involve you in the court's quarrels and make you unable to survive without their help, which would require compensation in an endless loop. The only thing that can keep Lith relatively safe is the blessing I bestowed him. I'll call you back as soon as I know something. Kala hung up, leaving an awkward silence fill the room. Journey opened her mouth more than once, but in the end she didn't say a word and walked out of the door. I don't think you should go. Dorian was the first to speak. I'm in charge of the investigation. I handpicked each one of you for the task. What happened so far is my responsibility. I can't allow you to take such risks. Exactly, Camilla added while squeezing his hand so hard that her knuckles turned white. You only came here as a diagnostician and to protect Tista. Neither the army or the association can force you to meet those monsters. Lith appreciated her concern, yet her words stung at him. Monsters? They just do what they think is right for their survival and have no qualms killing those who stand in their path. I don't see any difference with what I do, with what society does every day under the pretense of morality or the greater good. Lith thought. I wonder what she would say if she saw my other form. Don't be too harsh on her. Solus was jealous of Camilla, jealous of all the care Lith put in each of their dates, of the camellia, yet she admired her courage and honesty. It's the first time she leaves her desk. Even Floria considered magical beasts as monsters back at the academy. People are always afraid of the unknown, but it doesn't mean that they stay scared forever. Let's be honest. Lith preferred to put that thought aside and focus on the matter at hand. I don't really have much of a choice. If Zolver is really the one who requested my personal file, then Kalarn is investigating me. I don't think our squabble will escalate, but it's not safe to remain as ignorant as I am now about the Night Court. Also, we always planned to make contact with the undead to solve my reincarnation problem or at least find a proper body for you. This is an opportunity as good as any other to see if they can be of any use or if it's just a dead end. It's all true. Solus sighed. Not to mention the possibility of you becoming Manohar's replacement if we fail to find him, or of the creation of another Black Star. If the professor is right about the kind of forbidden magic taking place in Other during the last months, there is no telling how powerful the cursed object resulting from all the missing people could be. Journey returned after a few minutes, while the others were still debating about where to start looking for Manohar. Other was a big city. Even if they used every single soldier and mage available, it would take weeks for a comb search, and they had hours at best. No one doubted that Manohar's captor wouldn't stand his antics for long. Still, the professor's death was unanimously considered the best-case scenario. If the one behind the meat puppets and Manohar worked together, it would be a nightmare. We need to talk. Journey sighed as she pulled Lith outside the room. I've just finished talking with the Crown. The Griffin Kingdom is long aware of the court's existence, and the royals are not happy with this situation more than we are. They were against the idea of sending you to meet the Dawn Court until I mentioned Arthan's name. She handed him her communication amulet, making Queen Silpha's hologram appear. Lith knelt down, well aware that all of his reasonings were about to become irrelevant. Stand up, great mage Verhen. Her square chin and sharp features made her serious face look almost intimidating. Since I have to send you into the lion's den, I think it's fair doing it in person. I hereby command you to do everything you can to find your missing colleague and unveil the identity of our enemy. As you command, Your Majesty. Lith inwardly grinned. He would have done it anyway. At least now he would also get rewarded for it. I knew it would happen sooner or later. He thought, you can't be valued as one of the best mages in the kingdoms and not expect to be thrown into the proverbial hornet's nest. Chapter 461. I don't want you to take unnecessary risks. We have interacted with all 3 undead courts in the past, so I can at least help you by not letting them catch you unprepared. Silpha continued. Don't trust anyone unless they have offered you their hospitality. It's their most sacred vow and the only one they won't break. Only ask questions, never for help. Otherwise it would make you indebted to them. Do not bring with you anything that you are unwilling to part from. As your hosts, they may request a gift of their choice. Refusing would instantly end the negotiations. Always emphasize that you are speaking on behalf of the kingdom, so that if they require compensation for their services, they will not be able to ask anything from you. Ponder every word and say as little as possible. Do you have any questions for me? If the Griffin Kingdom knows about these courts, why are they still standing? Lith asked. I have no idea about the scope of their power or agenda, but they seem powerful enough to represent a threat. Having a country inside the country looks dangerous to me. For the same reasons, every one of the 3 great countries can't destroy them. Silpha sighed. Some of their members exist from the time before even our kingdom was founded. Not only do they are powerful and wise, but they also have made secrecy a form of art. I know from experience that they have functioning warping arrays even inside cities like other, where it's supposed to be impossible. The second biggest reason that makes it hard to spot them is that they do not interfere in political struggles. They do not seek temporal power. Their interests and our own rarely meet or collide. Between their limited numbers and the discretion with which they operate, finding one of their safe houses is just a matter of luck. The more Lith learned about them, the less he liked the situation he was in. Undead on Mogar seemed to act more like an Earth's secret society rather than the dumb monsters he was used to see in horror movies or in dungeons and looting rulebooks. This is way worse than I thought. Even the Dawn Court sounds like a viper's nest. I need to tread with extreme caution. Lith grumbled. Don't you mean we? It was the first time since they had met that Lith excluded her from his plans. It was enough to shock Solas's very core. No, this time I'm alone. I don't know who I'll meet, and the more ancient a being is, the more likely is for them to be awakened or at least have artifacts that can grant them senses akin to life vision. I can't risk bringing you along. I can't forget how everyone who learned about your existence reacted. Nalier, Scarlet, the Black Star. They were all either scared or anxious to study you. I'm more than confident to be able to kill a single undead, but a whole court? I doubt they can't rip you off from my dead body once I run out of tricks. They have the advantage of numbers and experience. You have seen how powerful Kalen is. I've practiced true magic from barely 17 years and learned about Tier 4 and 5 only 2 years ago. I can't compare with someone with centuries of practice. After the Queen ended the call, Lith didn't wait for Kala's answer to prepare for his departure. He had the army give him a second uniform and entrusted everything he had on himself to Tista. He only kept Solas's ring. He was unwilling to part from her for even one more second than was strictly necessary. The memory of what had happened when Nalier had severed their bond was deeply etched in their minds. Even though this time they would just be apart, the unbridled rage that possessed him whenever he was by himself scared him. Solas was more than his moral compass and his life companion. She was the sun that marked the thin line between sanity and madness that he had walked along his whole life. Lith wasn't a murderous brute, but the idea of having to fight alone against his inner demons while facing centuries-old tricksters was far from appealing. Kala contacted him again a few minutes after he was done with his preparation. I've set you an appointment with others Dawn Court. Beware, though, I have no one I can trust among their ranks. Kala gave him the same advice Queen Silpha did, before telling him the time and place where he would find her contact. Lith was supposed to be on a small hill outside the city gates in less than 5 minutes. It was a safety measure to make it impossible for someone to follow him or to arrange a trap for the court's envoy. Lith knew he had no time to lose, yet taking off Solas's ring took him several seconds. He put Solas on Tista's open palm, his fingers refusing to let go of the smooth stone surface that had become more familiar to him than his own flesh and bones. "Don't worry. I'll be back soon," he said to both girls while closing Tista's fingers over the ring. Lith had already lost too much time. He left the association's building in a hurry and took off at full speed toward his destination. Much to his surprise, his communication amulet drew his consciousness soon after he left Other. Kala's rune was blinking again. "One last thing," she said after making sure he was alone. "Don't worry about hiding your nature of Awakened One. Most ancient undead just need a sniff of our blood or a gaze to recognize us. So I told them that you are one of us, and as such you are protected." "Protected from what?" Lith asked. "Now that I think about it, it's surprising that during your travels no one tried to force you to share the secret of awakening. I can understand that undead have a strong sense of kinship, but bad apples are everywhere. Protected from being kidnapped, forced to reveal your secrets, or having your family threatened. Just like the undead have their courts, we Awakened Ones have our council. It doesn't care if we live or die, but whoever tries to force their way to awakening is bound to die. The council doesn't guard our lives, but treasures our secret. No one, no matter how powerful, wants to cross the council. Awakened Ones are a race of their own and are merciless. Some of its members are almost as ancient as this continent. If they combine their efforts, wiping the courts off the face of Mogar would require but the blink of an eye." "How do I contact them?" Lith asked. "They'll contact you when they will deem you ready." Kala hung up, leaving Lith more amused than worried by that piece of information. After studying the history of the kingdom, he had always suspected the council's existence. Over the centuries, too many mages had died or disappeared after announcing world-shaking revelations about magic's true potential. Chapter 462. Lith had no trouble finding the meeting place. With the incoming winter, the outskirts of Other were deserted. Both humans and animals were completing the last preparations before the first snowfall. Even though there was still time before the end of the fall season, the temperature would plummet after sunset. Away from the stone buildings, the dry winds coming down the nearby mountain range whipped at Lith's skin. His breath steamed in the cold of the night, while the air currents were so strong that he needed to conjure a wind barrier to protect his eyes and not get pushed off course. Usually, Lith would employ fire vision to scout his surroundings, but given the nature of his hosts, it wouldn't be of any use. Dead bodies released no heat. Only life vision could spot them. The hill was the highest point within a few kilometers from Other. It was a rugged and barren landscape, yet he could see too many lingering magical energies for it to be just a coincidence. Despite it was almost the convened time, Lith was alone. "I understand why you like this place. With a clear sky, there is no place to hide. You can spot anyone approaching from miles away," Lith said to a shadow near the summit. "How did you know I was here?" The shadows opened, revealing a young man in his early 20s. He was a normal human being, of average height and build. The wind ruffled his brown hair, while his deep green eyes showed only surprise. "Magic," Lith replied. The black cape the youth wore would fuse him with the darkness as long as he remained still, but the cloth's magical aura was perfectly visible to life vision. "Show me your invitation." The man ignored Lith's provocation and spoke with a kind, baritonal voice. Lith raised his left palm and sent some mana into it. The runes Kala had bestowed upon him a few weeks before produced a white light. The youth took Lith's hand to watch them closely. His body shivered at the contact. The cape protected him from the cold even better than Lith's ranger uniform did, but it could do nothing against killing intent. Lith hated being touched, and without solace to soothe his violent nature, he was ready to kill the stranger at the slightest provocation. He had weaved several spells on his way to the hill, and all of them were now prickling his skin, only kept at bay by Lith's will. It was their threat that he was perceiving. Lith was placid like the surface of a lake instead. His eyes were ablaze with mana as he examined the stranger with life vision from head to toe. Aside from the cape, he had only an enchanted item inside his breast pocket. Its aura was too weak for a weapon. After a few seconds, the youth nodded and let go of Lith's hand. He took a small mana stone out of his pocket, placing it inside a hole in the ground. Dozens of runes lit up the hill's summit, while two concentric magic circles formed in front of Lith's astonished eyes. "I recognize the magic circles. This is a warping array." Yet it even escaped life vision's detection. Damn it, I wish Solus was here. She would have no problem understanding what's going on here. Knowing that she would be able to access all of his memories later, Lith tried to memorize everything he could while keeping an eye on his host. Wait a minute. He thought once the array was perfectly formed. The runes had left the ground and were now floating in midair. I recognize some of those runes. They are the same that were engraved on the god of healing's altar. Lith tried to remember if the altar had any socket, but all that came to his mind was dust and cobwebs. He was too used relying on Solus's assistance to take note of small details. Don't bother memorizing this place, the youth said, misunderstanding the reason Lith was staring at the magical formation. It's likely that the array will be destroyed as soon as we leave. Humans cannot be trusted. Disgust coded his last phrase. At any other moment, Lith would have made a snarky remark about both of them being human. Without Solus, he could only think about how annoying it was, all that chatter, and suppress the desire to break his neck. He followed the youth inside the magical formation, appearing inside a richly decorated room. It had no windows, making it impossible for Lith to understand their new location. The furniture was made of inlaid secular wood, while the ornaments, from the flower pots to the bookends, were made of solid precious metals. The air was filled with the sweet scent of flowers he had never seen before, yet Lith was certain to be underground. Ever since he had refined the blue core, his body would naturally breathe in the surrounding world energy. The imbalance between air and earth mana told him that the room was surrounded by tons of rocks. He kept using life vision, noticing that several unknown arrays covered the room. He used first magic to check if any element was blocked. Much to his surprise, everything worked just fine, even gravity and dimensional magic. There's no need to be so nervous, awakened Varan. Lith turned abruptly toward the source of the feminine voice. It sounded as sweet as honey and blissful as only first love can be. It belonged to a red-headed woman in her late 20s. She was about 1.7 meters, 5 feet 7 inches, tall, wearing a bright red silk satin evening dress emphasizing her pale skin and soft curves. Her emerald parure matched her green eyes, making them even more dazzling. I'm Scylla Ekna, Duchess of the Dawn Court. I offer you our hospitality on behalf of our queen for as long as you wish to stay among us. Treat us with the same respect we'll give you, and there will be no enmity between us. Lith ignored her words and stared at her with life vision. She was weaker than Kalarn, so he was sure he would be able to kill her if necessary. Neither her superficial kindness nor the miles of cleavage she was showing impressed him. In life, she would have been considered far less beautiful than Freya, but undeath gave her smooth, delicate features and kept her body lithe. Every one of her movements was graceful and sensual, yet Lith knew he was in the presence of a predator. I'm Great Mage Lith Verhen of Her Majesty's service. I speak and act on behalf of the royal court of the Griffin Kingdom. I thank you for your hospitality, and I hope that albeit we meet as strangers, we'll part ways as friends. He replied, quoting the ceremonial Kala had taught him. Scylla's left eye twitched in annoyance. Not only did the human's indifferent gaze offended her to no end, but he had also avoided all the missteps that would have allowed the Dawn Court to kick him out or at least demand some of his blood as compensation. Awakened ones were a rare delicacy. Please, tell me what can we do for you? She sat on one of the chairs, inviting him to do the same while the brown-haired man served them drinks. Lith explained to her other's situation. He noticed how with each detail he provided, her annoyance was replaced by a gloating expression. You are lucky. I think we can help you. For the right price, of course. Chapter 463. Lith took a deep breath and let life vision fade away. He had used it non-stop since he had landed on the hill, and the built-up fatigue had already reached the point of giving him a mild headache. Despite it was one of the first abilities he had learned as a kid, using life vision still put a heavy burden on his mind and mana. Unlike normal spells, life vision evolved with Lith's core refinement. The more powerful he became, the more details life vision revealed. He was now able to read the mana currents natural beings produced, see the runes which composed arrays even when they were invisible, and gather basic information about enchanted items from a distance. Not only was the mana consumption high, but also it required great focus to avoid sensory overload. Everything on Mogur had mana, forcing Lith to filter the useless information. The task was particularly hard when he was in the presence of lots of strong magical signatures. Studying his host, the room, and its arrays while keeping his guard up all the time had brought him on the verge of needing to use invigoration. Unluckily, he couldn't afford it. Lith had already used it once to recover after the fight against the perfect carpenter and another to save his companions. With each use, invigoration would grant him less and less energy. The night is still young. First, I have to deal with the Dawn Court. Then we need to rescue Manohar, and lastly take out the Puppet Master. Knowing my luck, I'll have to pave my way in blood, steel, and magic. Lith sighed. Thanks for your offer, but the kingdom is capable of dealing with this threat on its own. I came to you hoping you could share with me everything you know. The crown will adequately compensate you for your assistance. Lith kept in mind the Queen's warnings and stalled for time. According to Solus, since the last breakthrough, with every breath Lith would draw a bit of world energy. It allowed him to recover his strength faster than normal, even without using invigoration. You seem to be unaware of others' situation. Our negotiations will not make any progress if you don't even know what we are talking about. Scylla's business attitude was a breath of fresh air now that she had stopped being flirtatious. The Dawn Court has little hold on other trade cities are of no interest to us aside from the merch they provide. Other belongs to the Night Court. Our presence here is a mere formality to protect our interests. If you want to know what's happening, you should ask the Night Court, but they are unlikely to give audience to a mortal. Unless, of course, another court backs their request and makes sure they get out of it in one piece. Let me guess. The Night Court will require something in exchange for its help. Maybe something that only your people can provide. It would make us indebted to you twice. At Litha's words, Scylla's ravenous smile returned. She liked her prey smart. All that talking made her hungry. Exactly. While setting up a meeting is not a big deal, depending on their demands the Dawn Court might require something more exotic than money or magical treasures. Then arrange a negotiation table, please. As you surely know, I'm on the clock. If the Night Court sets too high a price, I can turn them down with no consequences, right? Lith asked. Scylla nodded in reply and summoned the brown-haired man. Caspian, you know what to do. The youth gave her a small bow before leaving the room. Do you mind a personal question? Lith pondered about his situation and the nature of his host. Worst-case scenario, I'm not going back empty-handed. Maybe the Temple of Zal hides a warping array like the one that brought me here. If I'm right, it means that carving those runes leaves a permanent gate that lacks a power source. He thought. It's incredibly ingenious, since in its depowered state it escaped even Solus's mana sense detection. With all those runes, it's impossible to understand which ones form the array and which are just gibberish. It must be an ancient form of magic the undead have preserved. Sure, but I expect you to answer one of my own. Her fluttering of eyelashes gave Lith the creeps. Scylla looked at him like Lith would at a skirt steak. You have a heartbeat and an almost human smell, so I was wondering, what kind of undead are you? I'm a banshee, she replied with a flattered smile, like he had complimented her attire. Caspian is my vassal, but I can't grant him any power until he becomes one of us. Lith nodded, pretending he had an idea of what her words meant. Aside from those from the Gaelic lore, the only banshees he knew were those from Dungeon and Looting Rulebook. She sure doesn't look like a cursed elf maiden, he thought while staring at her perfectly normal ears. On Mogar, banshees weren't just women. Anyone who had been cheated on by their alleged one true love could become one. They needed to kill with their hands the person who turned their love into hatred and then commit suicide. If their rage and despair were strong enough, it would lure a nearby banshee who could then decide to turn them into one of their own. Outside the three courts, it was an event as likely as being killed by a meteorite. Banshees fed on the life force of the unfaithful. They could either just kill them or slowly drive them into madness. Their vengeful nature made them skilled seducers. For a banshee, there was no greater pleasure than feeding on those who fell for their temptations. Lith being both faithful and an awakened made him a world-class buffet in her eyes. Do you have an ear fetish? She asked while leaning toward him while sweeping her hair to allow him to take a better look at the alleged object of his desires. She was now so close that their lips were barely an inch apart. Not at all. Lith moved his seat back to regain some personal space. I was afraid you would ask for something juicier. How long will it take to get the Night Court's reply? Scylla's eyes turned black in anger when she realized her blunder. Hunger had got the better of her and made her waste her opportunity to force him to open up with her. Caspian's return helped her to regain her cool. "It's already done. Please follow me." She led him through corridors filled with exquisite decorations. There wasn't an inch of floor or walls that wasn't covered by lavish carpets, golden embroidered tapestry, and paintings so beautiful that even someone as unappreciative of arts like Lith had no problem to recognize as masterpieces. Scylla moved so fast that Lith could only steal a glance here and there before she opened a door and let him enter first. The amount of mana filling the room almost blinded Lith, forcing him to shield his eyes with one hand. Chapter 464. The source of his distress wasn't the magical nature of all the items in the room, from the round black mahogany table to the silk-covered armchairs. Nor it was the densely packed arrays surrounding the area. Lith had seen much worse during his visits to the royal palace. Kalarn was sitting on the opposite side of the round table in front of him, with the rejuvenated Count Zolver standing right behind his master. Sitting on the left side of the table, there was a skeletal figure, which despite its rotten flesh and dusty clothes emitted a majestic aura like Lith had never seen before. The creature appeared like a sun to his life vision, making it easy for Lith to recognize its nature as Awakened One and Lich. City of Other, Mage Association's meeting room. Lith had left for a little more than 2 hours, but his few possessions already weighted like stones in Tista's arms. She would use invigoration on them from time to time, using their imprint to reassure herself that her brother was still alive. Journey wasn't worried for him, yet her eyes refused to move from the sheathed form of the gatekeeper which laid on the table in front of her. She remembered all too well how long she and Floria had pestered Orion to forge master the sword as Litha's birthday present. Those were other times, when that blade was much more than a simple instrument to kill. For Journey, it had been a means to multiple ends. It was supposed to help Lith to stay alive amid the chaos of any battlefield, to guarantee the happiness of her daughter, Floria, to lay the foundations of a relationship that would bring glory to the Erna's household. Her fingers caressed the hilt of the sword, recognizing the markings of her husband's craftsmanship. All of that was in the past, making Journey love and hate that cold piece of metal at once. In her eyes, it held too many broken promises and wishes that never came true. Camilla stared at her now empty hand. She could swear to be able to feel his warmth lingering on it. Her mind was fixated on the image of the camellia waiting for her in their hotel room. She had brought it to Other from her apartment a couple of days after she had moved there, unwilling to let it die because of Commander Barion's manipulations. "I do realize we don't know each other for long. Just like I'm aware that since this mission started we've been nothing more than roommates until this evening. Then why does it hurt that he left without saying goodbye? How much do I really care about our relationship?" Inside her ring form, Solus had yet to metabolize how quickly they had parted ways. It wasn't the first time that she left the hand which for so many years had been her whole world, but it was the first time that he had willingly left her behind. As soon as Lith had left the range of their mind link, the whole Mogre seemed to have changed in front of her. The colors were brighter, the lights warmer. On the faces of the members of the association, where she would usually see hints of deception and ill will, she saw only honest worry for the citizens of Other. Without Litha's traumas haunting her perceptions, without his paranoid, narrow standpoint on people echoing through her mind, there was so much more beauty in the world that she had ever thought possible. Even so, it didn't bring her any joy. Without her partner, all the promises of happiness the future held sounded empty. Her stone body was now a prison. She could perceive the outside world, but she couldn't feel anything. It was like being locked in a closed room, looking through cameras at what happened on the outside, with no way to interact. A silent witness. I understand why he went alone, but I still can't believe he didn't ask for my opinion. After all we went through together, doesn't Lith realize how important he is to me? If he dies, what will become of me? I could bond with Tista, but to what end? To watch her grow old and die? To become some kind of family heirloom? To watch others live their lives while the only thing that changes for me is the hand holding my destiny? What good is to me if I regain all my powers, maybe even a human body, and have to spend eternity alone, to lose the only one who knows and cares for my soul? Solus was aware that unless she started spending mana, she could last months before being forced to bond again. Nonetheless, She felt like she was dying a bit with each passing second. Inxialot, the Lich King, stared in hatred to all those inside the room. Liches didn't actually have a king. The title was merely a consolation prize for getting the short end of the stick during the last raffle to determine who would represent the undead awakened ones for council duties. Since the secret of the awakening, in the form of the human newborn, had to be protected from his fellow undead, the council had sent Inxialot to make sure the courts abided by the rules. Litha's life or death were irrelevant to him. The only thing he cared about was to prevent a bunch of idiotic immortal fools from becoming capable of competing with him for power and resources. Otherwise, he would have never left his lab for so long. He hated all the courts the same way. Damn bastards. At least council meetings last minutes. This shenanigan could take much more, maybe even hours. Did I put out the fire under my cauldron? I've been preparing that elixir for years. I don't know who, but someone is going to die for making me leave so many priceless experiments unattended. Panic and rage came in and out of the revolving door that was his chaotic mind. His mana flow was so vigorous that even Life Vision could see it circulate along the whole Lich's body. It seeped into every one of his rings, every fiber of his tattered robe, and even inside the staff he held. Lith had no idea how others could be so calm despite being in the presence of such a monster. Chapter 465. I'm Duchess Scylla Ekna. I'll represent the interests of the Dawn Court and of its host, Awakened Verhen, during the parley. Lieutenant Colonel Kalen is the emissary from the Night Court, while Lich Inxialot is a neutral spectator on behalf of the council. The Banshee gave a graceful curtsy to the Lich first and to Kalen later. The vampire was aware of how volatile a Lich's behavior was, yet Scylla's breach of etiquette still angered him. So when the Lich kept staring into space without returning the greeting, Kalen did the same. It had been one of the ugliest nights in the last few centuries of his existence, and it kept getting worse by the hour. His newest vassal had managed to anger the only awakened one for miles, someone even the Night Court was unaware of his existence. Kalen had been forced to protect his investment, and albeit his brief clash with Lith ended in a draw, he had suffered a humiliation nonetheless. The news of Kalen's inability to discipline his own dog had spread like wildfire in the Night Court, making him a laughingstock. No one cared about Lith being an awakened, nor a guest of the Dawn Court. The only thing that mattered to his peers was that Kalen had left the gala while Lith remained. Any result but victory was seen as weakness by his court. Later, some of his most prized connections with the black market had been slain after turning into monsters. Being embarrassed in public and losing a good chunk of his influence inside other had made Kalen's rank of lieutenant colonel inside the court shaky at best. When he heard about the young awakened seeking audience, he had volunteered to regain some of the lost face. The presence of the Lich threw a monkey wrench in his plans. The mortal was in a hurry, so Kalen's tactic was supposed to exploit such weakness to force him into accepting an unfavorable deal. Squeezing mystical treasures from the Dawn Court would have made him regain his honor and forced the mortal to take part in the court's power plays, giving Kalen the opportunity to achieve his revenge. Two birds with one stone. Unluckily, Liches were fickle creatures, and one of the few even more impatient than mortals. Stalling for time was likely to earn Kalen a quick but excruciating eternal sleep. All is not lost. I just need to exploit the Lich's nature, and that mad thing will do the dirty job for me. The vampire thought. What do you want, human? Direct approach was another breach of etiquette, but it earned him a nod of approval from Inxialot. I need to know who is behind the meat puppets that kidnapped Professor Manohar and where I can find him. Even without solace, Litha's survival instinct was screaming at him to leave the room in a rush. The Lich was the most powerful creature he had ever seen, and to make things worse, he was an awakened one. If he uses invigoration on me, he might discover my second life force. I can't afford to arouse his curiosity, or I risk spending the rest of my life as a guinea pig. Liches were the only greater undead Lith knew a great deal about thanks to Kala. He knew that there was nothing they wouldn't do to further their quest for knowledge. Breaking all the laws of the courts and the kingdom at once would be a small price to pay to get their hands on an anomaly like Lith was. You are asking a lot. How much is worth to you the life of one of the greatest mages? Inxialot's head turned on the Night Court's representatives. His gaze made Count Zolver fall to his knees, unable to breathe. Kalen remained unfazed only because he was already sitting and his sweat glands were as dead as a doornail. I mean, the life of one of the greatest mortal mages and the location of one of the Griffin Kingdom's greatest enemies? Inksealot's eyes went blank again. They amount to nothing to me, Lith said with a wave of his hand. On the other hand, the Griffin Kingdom is very interested in both matters and would pay you handsomely. If the information provided is reliable, of course. This is not a cattle market where you can check the animal before paying its price. Kalen's voice perfectly hid his annoyance. The human was aware of at least some of the rules of the game. Then I'll settle for Professor Manohar's whereabouts. Lith replied, if the first information proves to be true, the kingdom will purchase the second one too. Lith pretended to be calm, but he was actually quite nervous. Damn it, I'm quite a good negotiator, but only as long as I know what we are talking about. If Kalen asks for artifacts like the small world, I have no clue how precious they are to the kingdom compared to Manohar's life. As per my host request, I've left my communicator amulet at the association. I can't ask further instructions from the queen, and relying on Scylla can easily backfire if she treats my request as asking for help instead of information. Fine, Kalen replied. Our request is for the Sword of Cynical, the Spell Hoarding Cube, and the following ingredients. Even before reading the list the vampire handed to him, Lith's poker face crumbled. The Sword of Cynical was one of the royal treasures passed down by Vaelron Griffin, the first king, while the cube had to be a state secret since it wasn't mentioned in any forge mastering book of the White Griffin Academy. The list of ingredients was short, but the items ranged from priceless to does it really exist in Lith's mind. This is daylight robbery if I ever saw one. Don't you agree, dear Duchess? Lith hoped that asking for an opinion counted as information. The lip service was unlikely to be helpful, yet it couldn't hurt to try. Indeed. She nodded without changing her expression. She wanted the human to get conned, so that by helping him he would become one of their assets. Not even the Dawn Court could afford such an unreasonable price to leash just one human. This whole building is worth way less than what you asked for, Kalen. Lith crossed out all the ingredients he wasn't able to evaluate before returning the piece of paper. There was still enough to cover a few times the annual budget of the White Griffin's Light Department. The artifacts aren't for sale. This is what I can offer you. Lith was actually willing to raise the offer, but he wanted to keep enough leeway during the negotiation. Is this a joke? Anger made some color return to the vampire's dead cheeks. No, it's me being generous. Lith replied. The Night Court is indebted to me after your vassal tried to steal my prey and then attacked me even after I showed him my references. Mana flowed to his right hand, revealing Kala's runes. As his master, you should take responsibility for his actions. Accept my offer, tell me what I want to know, and I'll consider the matter between us solved amicably. Lith noticed how important were formalities to the courts. He hoped his earlier incident with Kalen might give him an edge. Chapter 466. Quite the contrary. The anger disappeared, and the vampire's tone turned stone cold. My vassal wronged you, but your retaliation was too extreme. He has lost most of the abilities the blood blessing granted him, and he might not be able to turn into a vampire anymore. My price takes into account the compensation you owe me. Take it or leave it. It was a lie. Zolver's blood core had just been weakened, even though none of the Night Court understood how. Only awakened ones and abominations knew about the existence of different kinds of cores and how did they work. I owe both of you nothing. Your vassal tried to manipulate me and my property, while you inflicted me an injury that almost cost me my life while facing those flesh monsters. Lith had no qualm adding a lie of his own. Gentlemen, please. Scylla interrupted their quarrel. Let's keep your personal business outside the parley. Otherwise it will take hours to reach a compromise. Inksealot was already tired of all that chatting even before it started, so when he heard the word hours, his mind spun at top gear to figure a way out of that nightmare. Both parties have suffered too great a damage to trust each other. Inksealot spoke for the first time since his arrival. According to Article 4 of the Court's Code of Honor, to prevent hostilities from escalating is required to perform the foul moon, so that blood wash out the blood and peace can return. With all due respect, Lord Inksealot, Article 4 states that the foul moon should take place in case of an irreconcilable difference between members of the courts. This is merely a business treaty between an awakened and the Night Court. Scylla didn't like the sudden turn of events. The Foul Moon was an ancient trial by combat that hadn't been invoked for centuries. It required a fight to the death between peers, which meant Scylla and Kaelin. She had no intention of risking her eternal life for a mere mortal, no matter how tasty. You are wrong. Inksealot rebuked with a glare that silenced any further objection. They are not discussing business. They are seeking reparation, since I have yet to hear a single counteroffer. Article 4, Section 3, Subparagraph 1. If the probatory member of a court assaults a guest from another, to avoid the conflict to spread to their respective courts, they must meet in a duel. Unless both their patrons are willing to take their place, of course. The Lich was indeed right. It was an obscure codicil, which sadly had never been repealed. The silver lining was that Lord Inksealot could propose the Foul Moon, but only one of the offended parties had the right to put their lives on the line. To Scylla, Lith asked, "What's our esteemed guest talking about?" Long story short, if you win, you get what you want and pay nothing. If he wins, you die and he gets to keep your corpse as a trophy. Inksealot chimed in without giving her the possibility to reply. Against which one of them am I supposed to win? Lith pointed at the vampire and his vassal. The proto-vampire. Inksealot used spirit magic to nail Count Zolver to the wall and clear any doubt. Let me get this straight, your lichness. If I kill that poor excuse of a noble, his master will give me the information I need, right? Inksealot nodded. What if Kaelin decides to seek revenge on me? It seemed all too easy. Lith preferred to stay on the safe side. If he decides to ignore the result of the combat, he will have to put his life at stake. The Foul Moon is a sacred ritual. Plotting against you would be an unprecedented violation. Any of his underlings exposing his treachery would be entitled to obtain his position within the Night Court, while his superiors who are afraid of his rise would be authorized to kill him and split his resources among themselves. So, I don't have to trust something as unreliable as his honor, but rather the greed of his rivals, within and outside the Night Court. Lith thought, it's not much, but what choice do I have? I can't leave empty-handed without a perfect excuse for the queen. I don't know the value of some of the listed ingredients, but I'm pretty sure the royals would rather lose Minohar than give away the jewels of the crown. Sooner or later, a man dies, whereas an artifact is forever. What if? Lieutenant Colonel Kaelin, if you allow me to call my queen, I'll ask her what I can offer you to have both sides satisfied with the outcome. Neither I nor the Griffin Kingdom wants to spill blood. The choice is up to you. That's impossible. Scylla shook her head. Amulets and their calls can be traced. It would endanger the Dawn Court. And the Night Court has no reason to grant you any leniency. Not only do you refuse my generosity, but also you dare to speak like you're doing me a favor? Either you have the authority to accept our terms, or you don't. The Night Court had no intention to help the Griffin Kingdom from the beginning. The unreasonable demands were to force a lose-lose situation on them. If Lith accepted, the crown would be weakened and blame him for it, whereas the Night Court would grow in power just by sharing the details of their customer. If he refused, the kingdom would lose its royal healer, their enemy would escape, and Lith would be branded as incompetent. Kaelin had made sure there would be no happy ending for his enemy. The human is out of luck. The Lich is doing exactly what I expected, and Scylla is either too afraid to speak or she just wants to corner him as much as I do. He inwardly smiled. Kaelin's arrogance made Lith think again about his options. He should know I'm way stronger than his thrall. Why even bother to save him just to toss him away like this? Lith thought. Duchess, what are the rules of the Foul Moon? He wanted to understand if the gap in magical prowess could be overcome with powerful equipment, since Lith had nothing but his clothes. It's a contest of pure might. No weapons nor protections are allowed. If you win, Kaelin will not be able to harm you or your propriety without risking his own life. But if you lose, you'll die a horrible death. She replied. Even though Lith couldn't see the trap, he could still smell it. It was all too easy. No matter if I accept or refuse Kaelin's rip-off deal, my career in the army and the association will be over. The Foul Moon actually solves two problems at once. It's much better to face a single opponent head-on than watching my back every night. I'm not strong enough to kill that vampire, yet. Since I can't force him to leave me alone, at least this way I can prevent him to gang up on me with the help of other members of the Night Court and give him a good scare. Count Zolver, I challenge you to foul moon. As he feared, a smug smile appeared on the faces of both the vampire and his vassal. Chapter 467. I accept, Zolver replied. Yet I'm no match for my opponent, so I request for a champion. I knew the Night Court's members are just overgrown ticks, but since when do you even accept cowards among your ranks? Inxialot hadn't tricked Lith on purpose. In his mind, running away from a challenge was something unthinkable. His words wiped the smile off their faces, while Lith's mind finally connected the dots. Wait, does a fight between peers means of the same rank in the court, or of equal strength? He asked. The latter, of course. Scylla replied with a wolfish smile. You should have asked for my help. He who lives alone dies alone. You have no friends here, and you knew it. Bah, don't worry, kid. Inxialot sneered. Awakened ones are the strongest race after liches. Everything else is trash. When will the fight take place? Lith asked while using invigoration to return to his peak condition. As soon as the arena is ready, and unless someone wants to die by my hand, it will happen within the next few minutes. Inxialot struck the ground with his silver staff, causing the whole room to shake. While Scylla and Kalen shouted orders in their respective communication amulets, Lith started to cast what he had always considered the most useless of all the trump cards at his disposal. Unknown location. Underground dungeon of the master of the meat puppets. Krishna Manohar had long come to terms with inferior minds having no originality. When he regained his senses, he didn't need to look at himself to know that his arms had been amputated. The professor knew his body so well that he noticed how his balance was all over the place the moment he opened his eyes. His waist was chained to the wall, and so were his legs. The room he was trapped in was a marvel in its intricacy. The walls and floor were made of metal. The air was kept thin and dry to the point he kept yawning for oxygen. Well, at least this is new. Usually, they just break up my arms. Someone here is very paranoid. I can understand why they took my hands off, but what is this room for? He thought. Unlike the master of the mansion, Manohar was unaware of awakened one's existence, so the design of the cell made no sense to him. An awakened wouldn't need their mouth or hands to cast, so the metal served to make it impossible to use earth magic, while the dry air blocked fire, air, and water magic. With no humidity, there was no water to manipulate, while fire would quickly burn the low oxygen content of the room and make the prisoner faint. Manohar was still dizzy from all the lightning bolts which had struck him a few hours earlier. With no hands, he had to use first magic to treat his minor wounds and the symptoms from the amputation. When the pain stopped hindering Manohar's mind, he continued using first magic while studying the restraints trapping him. As he expected, they weren't regular chains. Even if he was unfamiliar with their design, the professor could feel enough mana coming from them to support multiple enchantments. This may take a while. He sighed. Awake already? It's not only your mind to be amazing. For a human, of course, said a familiar feminine voice while opening the cell door. Can you drop the evil overlord act? It stopped being fun before I was even born. It makes you look even more pathetic than you already are. Tough talk for someone in your position. Hessie, Lady Lanza's personal housemaid, walked to the center of the room with a soft, cruel smile on her lips. There was nothing bashful in her gait anymore. She stood as straight as a queen, looking down on Manohar like he was a thief locked in a stockade. I feel ashamed for falling for your act. The professor said, the only excuse I have is that I checked you for both slave items and meat puppets. How did you come up negative to my tests? His professional curiosity was piqued. According to Hessie's personal file, she had no magical talent. Her history was clear and with no gaps. Yet there she was, exuding such strong mana that Manohar's neck hair was standing up. Her eyes were still chestnut, so she wasn't remotely controlled like a meat puppet. Easy. I took over her body months ago. Your spells detected nothing because there's nothing to detect. I'm Hessie now, or at least what's left of her. Are you saying it's not just shape-shifting? Manohar had never been so happy of being kidnapped. The lady in front of him was as crazy as interesting. She would make an incredible specimen. If I manage to capture her alive, and if those buzzkills of the crown don't execute her on the spot. He inwardly smiled. Manohar lived for the challenges. Enough chit-chat. There's a reason why you are still alive. Because you need my help. Manohar interrupted her. Let me guess. After seeing me at work, you understood how sloppy and crude your methods are. So you want me to teach you how to do things properly. Hesse's eyes were reduced to fiery slits, brimming with mana. How dare you belittling my work, you insignificant runt. My art is perfect, or better, it was supposed to be. I want to know, how did you extract my puppy alive from its host? Her anger made the professor's condescending attitude turn to hilarity. Art? Perfect? Are you really such an idiot? Your magic is messy at best, if not wasteful. I hoped you were like Balkier, a genius like me, but that because of poor personal choices ended up swamped with too much scut work, slowing your research. If you think that junk is perfection, then you are barely at a fifth-year student level. Once I used my diagnostic spell, I found at least 12 major flaws and as many ways to safely remove the specimen. Off the top of my head at that. Manohar was so disgusted that he stopped talking and started chanting. What do you think you're doing? Hesse released a bolt of darkness magic from one of her rings, but Manohar easily dodged it despite his restraints. His movement revealed a set of arms made of light that had remained hidden behind the professor's back up to that moment. The chant ended, and the chains fell onto the ground with a metal clattering. It was the Tier 4 Forge Master spell Clean Slate, an exclusive of the elite of the army, the association, or in Manohar's case, of the Queen's Corps. It generated a combined pulse of light and darkness magic that would temporarily short-circuit the imprint on a magical item. In the case of the chains, without an owner, the lock was released. Before Hesse could recover from the surprise, the left arm formed a fist and struck at her like a ram, sending her sprawling on the floor. Light magic used for offense? That's impossible. The first magic composing the hard light construct was enough to allow Manohar to channel his spells, but its offensive force was just slightly superior to that of an average man. Just because an idiot can't do it, it doesn't mean that something is impossible. Manohar said while Hesse stared at him with a mix of fear and awe. Chapter 468. Ever since the dawn of magic, the light element had been known to be useless in battle. It had no offensive spells, and aside from healing small wounds, the exhaustion that spells below Tier 4 caused on their patients made them a double-edged sword. Light magic experts always protested that such claims were ridiculous. There was no element weaker than the others. Yet aside from legends and fairy tales, no one had ever won a battle with light magic. At least according to official history. There were many reports about magical beasts well versed in the use of the light element who were capable of using it for attacking. Scarlet had decimated the Talon's headquarters using light magic. Lith would have died from Gadorf's purge spell if Captain Yurna hadn't stopped him. Yet some secrets were closely guarded. Despite having lived for centuries, the person inhabiting Hesse's body had never learned how to perform even a trick like the one Manohar was using to compensate for his lack of arms. The mad professor chanted his next spell, leaving Hesse with no choice but to summon her minions while she got out of the death trap of her own making. Because of the nature of the room, all elements besides light and darkness magic were disabled. She could cast lightning, but it would be deviated by the metal in the room. If Manohar wasn't already floating, he would only need to jump to avoid the bolt before it was neutralized by the lighting rods hidden below the floor. It was a safety measure to prevent an inmate to strike all their captors at once if the electrical current was trapped in the metal instead of being discharged. To make things worse, the cell also made it impossible to use even arrays, which left Hesse with only her body as a weapon. Once I'm back inside my mansion, I can use my arrays and my puppies to kill him. It was a mistake taking him prisoner. Manohar is too dangerous to let him live, she thought. Unluckily, her reasoning was based on a false assumption. She had never captured him. Manohar had allowed himself to be taken. When he noticed that the lightning array wasn't lethal, he was presented with a dangerous choice. Resisting the array would have given the meat puppet the time to free its companion and take over the guards. Manohar would have lost his specimens and all the leads they had. Playing possum, instead, would have had the same consequences, but it also meant letting the meat puppets do all the hard work and bring him right inside the enemy base. After days spent literally chained to journey with nothing to do but wait, the gala with Minna had helped the professor to make up his mind in a split second. I don't fear slave collars nor meat puppets. I know how to jam and remove them. I'd rather risk my life than waste another single day with that brute of a constable. I need to get back to my research. had been his last thought before losing consciousness. Thank heavens regenerating limbs is much easier now. Without Litha's spell, I would be forced to turn this place upside down to find my arms, was his current trains of thoughts. Contrary to Hessi's expectations, Manohar didn't rush outside the safety of his prison. He cast an array-detecting spell before unleashing a powerful earth magic shockwave that cracked all of the revealed array's lines of power. It wasn't enough to destroy them, but that had never been his aim. The professor remembered the materials Hessi's thralls had purchased, and she had confirmed to him that she had been there for just a few months. Setting permanent arrays required time, resources, and a talent Manohar doubted such a self-proclaimed genius could possess. His detection spell had only confirmed his theory, making his next move child play, at least for the mad professor's standards. Temporary arrays had much lower requirements, but needed a fine balance to prevent their effects from interfering with each other. He had just dealt them enough damage to compromise their alignment. If his enemy activated them, they would either fizzle or blow in her face. A few perfect carpenters arrived, their vortexes at full force to drain any incoming spell at the cost of their lives. The first one charged inside the cell like a mad bull. Hessi's will was absolute. Manohar sneered as a giant sword made of pure light impaled the creature and those following it like a kebab. Seriously? Are you really a one-trick pony? I figured out the weakness of those things the first time I extracted my specimen. They can nullify spells of Tier 3 and below, but Tier 5 is another story. If the ability of your creatures is weaker than the one of whom guides the spell, it becomes useless. That's how I extracted your dear puppy, you idiot. I never failed to control one of my spells, and I have no intention of starting today. Hessi stared in horror as the flesh of her creatures entered Manohar's body and gave him back his arms. Their life force was consumed as well, replenishing his own. This man is a real monster, Hessi thought. I must force him to run out of mana before he tears my house apart. Unluckily for her, the professor's bright purple core and his relentless practice of magic made his mana reserve almost as insane as he was. Dawn Court Branch, outside the city of Other. Now, when Lith had heard the word arena, his mind had pictured a place similar to the Earth's Colosseum. The place the Dawn Court reserved for ceremonial battles was akin to a huge theater instead. The fight would take place on a circular raised platform made of white stone that only a thick cylindrical energy barrier separated from the front row of spectators. Comfortable armchairs were evenly spaced on a balcony that surrounded the center stage. The arena had a diameter of 40 meters, 130 feet, which together with its high ceiling allowed the fighters to have plenty of space to battle on both the ground and the air. Lith had been spellcasting non-stop from the moment the challenge had been issued. When his opponent arrived, he had yet to finish his spell. Damn, they are afraid of the Lich as much as I am, if not even more. I need to stall for time, he thought. To Inxialot, he asked, how can you be sure the Night Court will not send one of its strongest members? The foul moon requires peers. You being a human and an awakened one at that, makes everything harder. Inxialot sighed. They had waited for almost 2 minutes after he warped them to destination at the end of the parley. They need to choose someone whose practice of magic and time as undead match your age. Then, the Dawn Court has to verify the champion's identity. I don't practice magic for 17 years. How is it fair? Lith lied through his teeth. He needed only a few more seconds. I don't make the rules, I just administer them. Otherwise I would have killed you all and went back home already. Inxialot snorted through his exposed nasal septum. A clap of his hands made the barrier even stronger and signaled the start of the fight. Scylla, Kalen, and Zolver were sitting next to each other. They all wore the same relaxed smile, like the fight was already over. I wonder if their sudden friendship and how fast the Dawn Court checked my opponent's background are related. Lith thought. Duchess Ekna had been crystal clear. Lith had no friends there, and he had no intention of making any. Chapter 469. Litha's opponent had the appearance of a brute. He was a man at least 2 meters, 6 feet 7 inches, tall, with long black hair and beard. His muscular body reminded Lith that of a professional wrestler. Unbeknownst to Lith, his opponent was a vampire named Zarin. He was Kalen's blood spawn and one of his favorites. His gray eyes moved quickly from Lith to the Lich while waiting for the start signal. Usually, Zarin would disregard such formalities, But since the referee was capable of turning him into a memory with just a thought, the vampire decided to stick to the rules. Or better, the rule. Once Inxialot clapped his hands, there were none. The rattle of bones and rings was his cue. Even if they weren't awakened, vampires could use air and darkness in their true magic form. Zarin took off, darting toward his opponent like a falcon on its prey. Lith clapped his hands a split second after Inxialot. His breathing was steady, his body so stiff to resemble a statue. Right above the fighters, covering the whole arena, appeared the very fist impossible array Lith had learned when he was just 12 years old. This time it wasn't meant to impress the White Griffin Academy's board. It was a terrible weapon. One of the golden points of Silverwing's hexagram lit up and Zarin's flight spell disappear, turning the falcon into Newton's apple. Lith waved his right hand, conjuring a stone pillar that intercepted Zarin's fall and sent him crashing against the barrier. Contrary to Lith's hopes, the magical formation dealt no more damage than a real wall would. According to Inxialot, the sum of this guy's years of magical practice and his time as an undead should be around 20 years, if the courts bent the rules. He's too buff to be a magician. I bet Kalen chose him because he's a pure vampire. Instead of sending a half-baked fighter, I would have picked a professional too. Alas, I'm no pushover either. Lith inwardly sneered as he waved his left hand. A stream of lightning intercepted Zarin while he bounced off the wall, turning his pale skin black. Both the fighters wore no armor. Lith had been forced to remove his ranger uniform for a white shirt made of the finest silk he had ever seen and night black pants so soft they would put cashmere to shame. Zarin was bare-chested, with only a pair of leather pants to cover him. At least the Dawn Court knows how to dress. These clothes are coming home with me. Lith knew that worrying about saving a few coins was ridiculous during a life-or-death situation, but since such a thing was just Monday to him, his wallet was entitled to speak. Zarin landed with the grace of a cat. His face was twisted in a mask of rage. Master Kalen told me the Awakened is supposed to be a brutal fighter. According to our information, against the meat puppets he relied on brute strength and magical tools, yet now he stands still. It must be related to the secret behind the array. Zarin thought. Vampires took damage from electricity-based attacks, but thanks to their undead nature, their movements wouldn't be hindered by them. It wasn't the nerves moving their bodies, just like their strength didn't come from their muscles. Hence Lith's lightning had not disrupted Zarin's focus. The vampire extended his arms, releasing a scattershot shower of darkness bullets. Their speed was slow, but from that distance and inside an enclosed space they were fast enough to be deadly. If Lith focused on dodging the daggers, the opponent would have an easy game overpowering him physically, while focusing on the enemy would leave him exposed to the incoming spell. Zarin moved forward almost as fast as the dark daggers, using them as a cover while approaching the enemy. Lith stood firm until the daggers almost reached him. Then, he took a deep breath and had the array neutralize the spell as he unleashed a barrage of plague arrows. He mimicked Zarin's strategy, leaving him astonished. It's impossible. Arrays are supposed to work both ways. Why does it negate only my spells? First air, now darkness too. It's bound to have some limits. Zarin thought, while dodging as many plague arrows as he could. Much to his surprise, Lith didn't press the advantage. Instead of charging forward, he used earth magic to turn the stone floor into sand, messing with the vampire's footwork. The strong kick that was supposed to propel him away from danger plunged into the ground instead. Zarin cursed his opponent and enveloped himself with a shroud of darkness. Multiple plague arrows struck him from head to toe, sapping his strength. Thanks to his last-ditch effort, the damage was halved. Unlike humans, vampires only needed to expend part of the energy stored inside their blood cores to heal from any injury. It wouldn't even sap their life force, only make them hungry. Zarin was well fed, so the exchange had only hurt his pride. The audience was stunned as well. Most of them knew Silverwing's hexagram, but had no idea what it was capable of. Only awakened ones could master impossible arrays, and usually their opponent ended up dead. The only exception was Inxialot, who was having a lot of fun. Not because of the fight, which was trivial and amateurish to his eyes. He loved watching the shocked expression lowly animals made when they realized the depth of their ignorance. I told you so. He turned his head of 180 degrees to look straight into Zolver's eyes without having to move. Liches are the strongest, then awakened. Remember that if your champion loses, your life is forfeit as well. Hessi's mansion. Now, the person wearing Hessi's skin was royally pissed. Manohar was a walking wrecking ball, crushing her minions and arrays in a matter of seconds after they met in battle. He's too fast. I need some time to revert to my real body. This one doesn't stand a chance against his impossible magic, she thought. The professor was now surrounded by a swarm of shields made of light as big as a man, which blocked any incoming attack, be it physical or magical in nature. Even in Hessi's body, the puppeteer was still a master magician with centuries of expertise. The problem was that while the carpenters kept their vortexes active, weaving spells was worse than a waste of mana. They would poison her creatures and kill them. At the same time, the moment they turned their vortexes off, they became sitting ducks. Without the boost from the constant consumption of world energy, Manohar would let his personal army of hard-light constructs mow the carpenters down like ripe wheat and focus his defense to block all of her attacks. She had even employed a war mage tier 5 Raging Sun, only to have it enclosed by his energy shields and snuffed out like a candle. Manohar was winning by a landslide, yet he kept his guard up, conjuring spells non-stop and keeping them on his fingertips, ready to be activated. He couldn't risk losing his concentration, otherwise both his spells and mana would be lost. Even though Hessi was forced to admit the gap between their talent, she had still centuries of experience to even the field, now that she finally understood what was happening. Chapter 470. Dozens of her minions had died to buy her time, but it had been worth it. She completed an array that sealed light magic in a space of 33 feet, radius around the mad professor, turning both his swords and shields into fireflies. Let's see who is the one-trick pony now, she said with a smug expression while watching the carpenters surround him. I'm going to retrieve my body. Kill him at all costs. Overload your bodies with mana and self-destruct if you have to. Hessi sent the telepathic order and walked away from the dungeon. After regaining her cool, she had realized that it was pointless to play by her opponent's rules. He was alone in her house. The only thing she needed to win was to play it smart. Skill and preparation could kill even the strongest genius. Manohar couldn't agree more with her. It was the reason why only one among the spells he had prepared was based on the light element. Too bad none of them could deal with his current predicament. I hate arrays. Manohar inwardly griped as he dodged bone claws the size of a great sword coming from every side. They may be slow ass, but one of them is enough to turn tables. Life is so unfair. So whine the man blessed by endless talent, a bright purple mana core, and an unlimited research budget. The mad professor was still alive only thanks to the Mage Knight full guard spell, which left him with no blind spots, and Marth's strict training schedule to force Manohar to stay out of his lab long enough to clean his mess. Together with his stubbornness, they allowed him to only sustain flesh wounds while weaving the tier 5 spell he was in desperate need of. He wasn't like Lith. He couldn't turn off his pain receptors, nor use silent magic. Manohar could only perform movements small enough to not disrupt his hand signs, with a rhythm that let him not stutter a single magic word, all while the carpenters sealed off the space around him by the second. One of the creatures stabbed the professor's left shoulder, leaving a gaping hole the size of a muffin, and made his arm fall lifeless by his side. Manohar snarled the next magic word like it was a curse, gritting his teeth for less than a heartbeat before finishing the chant. Unluckily, it was too late. Not only did the claw went through and through, causing major bleeding, but it also stopped Manohar's movements long enough for its companions to pile up on the helpless human. A carpenter grabbed Manohar's right arm, crushing it like a twig. Another used its clawed hand to stab his chest. And then it finally happened. The mad professor's shadow came to life, taking the form of a blue-eyed colossus. It was over 3 meters tall, 10 foot, with a spiky back like an urchin and slender arms that almost reached the ground. Its hands had 4 fingers, each one as long and sharp as a blade. It had no legs. The lower part of its body was just a thin line connected to Manohar's. It was Balkier's tier 5 personal spell, Death Ruler, which Manohar had reverse-engineered after reading the God of Death's notes found in one of his old labs. The mad professor's body had fallen limp not because of the wound, but because his mind had left his physical shell. The death ruler freed his human body by ripping to shreds the nearest carpenters with its claws. The pieces tried to reassemble themselves, but the darkness energies poisoning them spread like a plague, turning them into rotten flesh. After that, the shadow colossus struck at the ground. Black vines sprouted from the point of impact, eating the energies which composed the array and his enemies alike. The death ruler didn't stop his rampage, growing in size with each fallen enemy. Their vitality wasn't destroyed, but stored for later use. The moment the array crumbled, Manohar's human body was showered with the life force equivalent of a small platoon. Light magic was unsealed, so his organs and bones could be repaired at the expenses of the carpenters' bodies. The mad professor had no time to eat. He was eager to return to his lab. Dawn Court Branch, outside the city of Other. Now, there were plenty of reasons why Uriel Dyrus had developed his own version of Silverwing's hexagram. Lockra's array could selectively negate all of the enemy's spells, but it was far from perfect. The greater its area of effect, the harder it was to keep the 6 elements in perfect harmony. Even in its small, first magic form, it took so much to cast it to make it useless. Also, negating a spell required from its caster to spend as much mana as its target contained. According to Uriel's estimates, between the mana expenditure to keep it active and the amount required to nullify the opponent's spells, his energy reserves would deplete faster than his enemies. It would take him barely a minute to run out of mana, and one-on-one at that. Against multiple enemies, it would be more than suicidal, akin to madness. Uriel's hexagram, instead, could only negate 1 spell per element, and the mana would be stored rather than countered. The accumulated energies could be unleashed at will to trigger a powerful gravity field. Silverwing's hexagram-heavy requirements made it useless even for Lith unless he knew in advance that he would face a single opponent in an enclosed space with no way out or external interferences, of course. Even with all the aforementioned conditions met, it wasn't as easy as he made it seem to the audience. The sheer focus required to keep all the 6 elements perfectly balanced over the whole arena while keeping invigoration active prevented him from moving a single step. Yet without his gatekeeper and his armor, he wasn't confident of being able to defeat an opponent with endless stamina and unknown skills. If even Zolver had forced him to use fusion magic, there was no telling how strong a real vampire could be. Zarin released several streams of lightning, and it took Lith a full invigoration breath to negate them all. Lith's fingers twirled in the air as the sand obeyed his command and sealed the vampire's limbs. The grains of sand stuck to each other, turning back into stone, yet Zarin was able to break free by consuming a good chunk of his blood core. It didn't simply enhance his strength, it made him shapeshift into a giant hybrid between a human and a bat. The creature was 2.5 meters, 8 feet 2 inches, meters tall, with membranous wings connecting his hands to his hips. 10 centimeters long razor-sharp talons replaced his nails as a thick dark brown fur, as hard as steel, covered the rest of his body. His open mouth was now bigger than Lith's head, with fangs long as short swords. A single flap of his wings let Zarin take the sky and escape from the sand's grip. This explains his horrible taste in clothes, Lith thought, while weaving multiple spells at once. Zarin was circling above his head like a shark around its prey. Fighting on the ground without magic is a lost cause. I must strike from above fast enough to escape from his spells and force him to move. Without the array, he's just a human. Chapter 471. The vampire noticed ice spears and darkness bolts materializing near his opponent. The ground spun underneath Lith's feet in a grand vortex, ready to swallow his enemy. Turtle up as much as you want. It takes more than a few hits to injure me. I still have a lot of juice. Zarin thought while he shot downwards like a bullet. His blood core empowered his new form to the point that its movements were almost a blur even to Lith's enhanced vision. Almost. The moment Zarin turned his back to the array, Lith dispelled Silverwing's hexagram. His mind was no longer burdened by the need to be in perfect sync with every element that composed the world energy. All of his spells crackled with new energy as their master's undivided focus flowed into them. The sand exploded upwards, covering the vampire's field of vision and making him slow down for a split second because of the sudden updraft filling his wings. It was all the time Lith needed to pinpoint Zaren's position long enough to switch their positions. Lith appeared in midair while the vampire's momentum made him crash against the ground like a meteor. Stunned by the impact, Zaren failed to react to the point-blank checkmate spears and plague arrows converging on him from all sides. While the low-tier spells pierced the membranous wings and ravaged the vampire's life force, Lith activated the Tier 5 War Mage Burial Ground spell. Several pillars erupted from the sand and surrounded Zaren while he was still stunned from his many injuries. The pillars grew in height by the second as countless stone spikes emerged from them, moving in every direction. Some stabbed the vampire, while the spikes which connected to each other would form new pillars that in turn generated more spikes. The spell was a hybrid of earth and darkness magic. The stone was a conduit for the dark energies, so even standing close to it was enough to sap its victim's life force. Count Zulver went pale, praying to any god from above or below to spare the champion's life and his own. Kalen jumped out of his armchair, swearing so much to put a sailor at shame. Unluckily, the Lich couldn't hear him above the noise of his own laughter. The whole Dawn Court was astonished. The fight had lasted less than a minute. A human less than half a century old had defeated a vampire who was twice his age before being turned with apparent ease. Being an awakened wasn't enough to explain how the unlife of someone who had spent 20 years mastering his vampiric powers could be snuffed out so fast. Apparent ease were the key words. Lith had used invigoration multiple times during that minute, channeling so much mana non-stop that his body was aching in places he wasn't even aware could hurt. The mental and physical exertion he had just gone through left him with a splitting headache. Yet he returned nonchalantly to the ground, wearing the same serial killer frown he had at the start of the match. I don't care how close Manohar is. I need at least an hour's sleep, or the next time I use invigoration might be the last one which has any effect on me. Lith sneered at the undead crowd. No one was smiling anymore. Female and male scum, whatever you are, we have a winner. Inxialot raised his hands, dispelling the barrier and giving Count Zulver an excruciating death by black flames of unknown nature. As the Lich beckoned with his finger, Kalen floated toward him from across the room until he was in the middle of the arena. A deal is a deal. Now you better start talking, because if I'm forced to stay here one more minute, or I'll make sure others' night court goes extinct. Hessi's mansion. Now. The carpenters had stopped rushing forward once they noticed that none of their attacks or spells seemed to hurt the shadow monster or its master. The Death Ruler's vampiric touch would heal any injury inflicted on Manohar's body. Manohar dispelled the Death Ruler as soon as he cleared enough space around him to handle the closest enemies. Balkier's spell consumed a lot of mana, even by the Mad Professor standards, and stopped the caster from weaving new spells or even using delayed ones. Several carpenters each unleashed a Tier 4 spell to cover their companion's advance, while those in the back row pushed their vortexes to the limit and overloaded their mana cores. If even the combined assault failed, their master had ordered them to perform a suicidal attack with the aim of burying Manohar under tons of rubble. Luckily for the professor, Death Ruler had allowed him to retain both his focus and the spells he had ready. He chanted his next spell while activating the Tier 5 Talk to the Hand, light magic. Giant hands materialized in front of the charging carpenters, grabbing and using them as literal meat shields against the incoming spells. Before the middle row enemies could reorganize, the hands of light adjusted their grip. They now wielded the captured creatures by their legs and swung them at their companions like living maces. That's what I call fighting fire with fire. He inwardly laughed. Meanwhile, in her throne room, Hessie had reached her true body. It was in suspended animation, inside a capsule made of metal, glass, and mana crystals placed right behind her royal seat. The body was floating in a purple liquid which was constantly pumped into the capsule through a series of tubes. Each tube was connected to a member of her court, who were exact replicas of the body inside the capsule. She sat on her throne and activated her Tier 5 light magic life flow. A stream of life force flowed from Hessie to the body in the capsule. When the transfer was completed, only a small amount of the original Hessie's life force remained, just enough to keep the body alive in a vegetative state. Thrud Griffin, daughter of Arton the Mad King, opened her silver eyes. Her body was back to its early 20s and had reached a new pinnacle. She had improved her father's procedure countless times, yet there were still so many problems to fix before it could be considered perfect. The arrogant Night Court had provided her the means to spread her puppies among others' population. All she had to do was to take over the body of one of their vassals and use him as a strawman to introduce a new kind of alchemical drug in the back market. It was a wonderful product which gave a great high and had no adverse reactions. Except it was no drug, it was just cough potion mixed with a few of her cells. They were enough to create a small vortex which sucked in the world energy, inducing a sense of euphoria and might. Only in the right subjects did the cells manage to develop and grow, until they turned their victim into a clone of Thrud. The clones were perfect donors, their life force and mana identical to her own. Thanks to her court, even though Thrud had yet to crack the secret of awakening, she had obtained the next best thing along with eternal youth. Chapter 472. Ingesting Thrud's cells only had 3 possible outcomes. Inside an incompatible host, they would die in just a few days. This was the most common scenario. In the case of partial compatibility, the subject would become a made mage. They would be useless as energy donors, but the symbiotic relationship with Thrud cells would allow her to influence their thoughts, to use them as her spies, or simply as sacrificial pawns to keep the authorities busy. Arthon's daughter had played that game many times. The trick was to constantly move from one country to another. She only needed one treatment once every 100 years, and she was careful to pick cities that were both populous and corrupt. By the time the local authorities noticed something was going on, Thrud was already gone. Once the odd phenomenon ceased, everything would be dismissed as an unknown disease, leaving not even a footnote in history books. This time Thrud had played with her food longer than usual, but for a good reason. Since her last treatment, magic had improved by leaps and bounds. The Griffin Kingdom was famous for having the best healers in the 3 great countries. She needed to be sure that her technique was still able to escape detection before moving to more efficiently organized realms, like the Empire or the Blood Desert. Thrud took pride in her work, and until that day she had believed it to be close to perfection. It only had 2 major flaws. The first was the difficulty of finding a perfect match. The second was that Mogr would only tolerate someone stealing its energy for so long. Be they made mages or the stupid nobles she lured with the promise of power, if they were too greedy in using their newfound magic abilities, Mogr would feel the itch and scratch itself in the form of a pillar of blue light. The planet would take back the stolen world energy, usually killing the burglar in the process. If one didn't have enough mana to pay their debts, Mogr would also take their life force as compensation. The death of a few pawns or carpenters wasn't a big deal, but blue pillars from the sky were something no one could gloss over. Aside from that, her plan was flawless. The perfect matches knew how to reach her and, by sharing her mind, they had all the necessary skills to disappear without leaving a trace. Even if the drug was discovered, there was no direct connection with her. The nobles under her thumb kept the authorities away, while the made mages served as a diversion. Thrud always had everything under control, or so she had believed until that night. Now that she was back in her body, she could appreciate its inhuman strength, its enhanced senses, and the increased vigor of her mana flow. She drained the last members of her court before flushing the purple liquid out of the capsule. Finding Manohar is actually a blessing in disguise, she said to herself while wearing her battle suit. I have the opportunity to test my abilities against the Griffin Kingdom's greatest genius in centuries. If I can kill such a monster, then the day when I defeat the accursed Tyrus is not far. I'll avenge my father and take back the throne that's rightfully mine. Meanwhile, several corridors below her, Manohar had used the Carpenter's suicide squad to wipe out the rest of his enemies. His Tier 5 can't touch this light magic spell had sealed the trigger-happy creatures inside a spherical dome along with their companions. Aside from a hole in the ground, the explosion resulting from their cores overloading had produced no effect. This is bad. Manohar was also used to thinking aloud, not because of centuries of isolation. He simply considered himself the only one worth listening to. I've consumed about half of my mana reserve, and I don't think that Miss What's-Her-Name will give me enough time for a cat nap. I need help. he said while turning around abruptly, scared at the idea that Journey would appear behind his back like she usually did at the worst possible times. There was something in that woman that reminded him of his mother enough to scare him out of his wits. A simple earth spell allowed him to identify the path of least resistance, while a light spell did the rest. All he had to do was to wait and rest. Dawn Court Branch, outside the city of Other. Now, having lost his most recent vassal, his most promising chosen, and most likely his rank of lieutenant colonel in the Night Court all at once, Kalen was as close to having a stroke as an undead could be. I can't give the human an address, since the place he is looking for is in the middle of nowhere. I can show him where it is, though. We need to get outside first, he said. A snap of Inxialot fingers blinked the four of them several hundreds of meters above the ground. Lith, Scylla, and Kalen were all shocked. Blink's range was about 30 meters, and extending it even by a dozen meters required lots of mana. Yet the Lich had moved all of them at once over a distance that usually only a warp could cover. The vampire tried and failed to not appear impressed while he looked at the horizon in search of landmarks. The Night Court had discovered of Thrud's existence soon after the first Made Mage appeared. If someone asked them why they hadn't made a move against her, the undead would reply that she had provided them with plenty of humans whose bodies were somehow highly enriched with mana. Feeding on their flesh, blood, or minds strengthened the undead's blood cores almost as much as if they had consumed a mage. Thrud was responsible for only a small portion of the missing person cases. The others were all victims of the Night Court's feeding frenzy. The truth was that they had already tried and failed. Some of the most prominent members of the court had assaulted her home to discover how she nurtured her humans. If the entire Night Court from every branch on the continent took part in the feast, the balance between the three factions would crumble and the undead world would belong to them. Unluckily, no one had returned to tell the tale. That was how Kalen had earned his rank, by filling an empty spot. Thrud just gave them her crumbs, and they could only suck it up. Any more losses would reveal to the world that a whole branch of the Night Court was under the heel of a human woman. The place you are looking for is. Kalen was cut short when a full-body hologram of Manohar the size of a hill appeared in the sky, along with an equally big arrow pointing at a ruined outpost in the wilds. Come here, quick. You need my help. The Colossus would say at fixed intervals, followed by fireworks visible from miles away. Inxialot laughed like a madman, while Lith, despite his exhausted state, could hardly repress the urge to kill Kalen first and Manohar second. Let me guess. I need to go there. Chapter 473. Kalen gritted his teeth while inwardly cursing at Manohar's untimely appearance. It had rendered the information he was forced to share due to the foul moon ritual useless. Luckily, he had another ace up his sleeve. Yes, but the place is heavily protected. You can't go in through the front door. I can see that by myself. Lith cut him short. Life vision showed him an energy dome around the outpost so strong that it would take hours to destroy it from the outside. Let me take another guess. I can get inside by using the warping array hidden in the old temple of the god of healing. Correct again. Kalen snarled, revealing his fangs in annoyance. I hope to never see you again. Not so fast. Inxialot stopped the vampire in his tracks. The deal was for information. So far you have provided nothing. Are you saying that you have just wasted my time? I mean, that you are willing to break a sacred oath. The Lich King had been itching to kill someone for hours for dragging him out of his lab. Finally, the rules of the competition gave him a reasonable excuse to vent his anger. I would never do such a thing. The vampire rushed to say as his fingers were turning to ashes. I can still tell him the name of his enemy. Oh, despite most of his flesh being gone, the Lich's face still managed to express every bit of disappointment that he was feeling. You are going to face Thrud Griffin. Kalen had a solemn expression while uttering her accursed name. Gods, Thrud Griffin. I never thought the day would come that I would hear that name. Inxialot said with a shocked voice. Do you know her? Lith was underwhelmed by the revelation. Griffin was a very common last name. Not at all. The Lich replied. It's just one of the most horrible names I have ever heard. Am I free to go? Kalen had no idea what Inxialot had done to his hands, but regenerating them caused him a great deal of pain. Another snap of the Lich's fingers blinked everyone present back to their respective apartments, even though all three of them were supposed to be warded against dimensional magic. Kalen and Scylla were both quaking in their boots, swearing on their undeath to never meddle with the Council of the Awakened again, no matter the reason. Lith was so pissed off for having gone through all that danger for nothing but a stupid name that he almost ripped the door of his hotel room off its hinges before taking flight to reach the Mage Association. Damn Manohar. One more hour, and I could have gotten actually useful information and some rest. I have nothing to offer the crown except for a name that might well be a pseudonym or just a moniker. He couldn't delay his return. The mad professor's hologram was perfectly visible even from other. Once the queen learned about it, she might order a full-scale attack on the outpost. Lith couldn't let Tista, Journey, or Camilla go anywhere near the carpenter's nest. The array surrounding it would either kill them or slow them long enough to make their contribution to the fight irrelevant. He had never witnessed Manohar's battle prowess, and being paranoid, he assumed the worst. I can only count on myself. Too bad that right now I'm too weakened to face even one carpenter on my own. The only silver lining is that with every breath I take I can feel my body healing and my power growing. Only when the clerk at the reception of Others Mage Association branch refused to let him in did Lith realize that he was still dressed like a dandy. The good news is that it was just a spare uniform. The kingdom will hardly miss it. The even better news is that I kept the clothes without even asking for them. He and his wallet both inwardly smiled. Luckily, even a desk clerk of the association had access to their database. It only took her a few seconds and a call to Dorian to verify his identity. Where have you been? Journey had the gatekeeper with her. Are you all right? Camilla threw her arms around him, checking for injuries. Why are you dressed like that? Since the others had beaten her to the punch, Tista decided to clear that small mystery while handing Solus and his skinwalker armor back to him. Solus had perceived his arrival the moment Lith was back in their mind link's range. She didn't contact him because of the conflicting emotions caused by their separation. She was happy to see that Lith was fine, yet it also exacerbated her feeling of helplessness. Solus was afraid that she would discover that Lith hadn't missed her as much as she did him, afraid that he had no use for her anymore, inside or outside the battlefield. During the last few hours, Solus had been surrounded by people, yet had never felt so alone. While others could speak, hold hands in search of comfort, or just take a walk to calm their nerves, she had been stuck in Tista's hand. Comparing her life with that of others made Solus scream and cry, yet no one could notice. I finally understand what Lith means when he says he is a shadow in a world of lights. We are both too different from normal people. Gods, I wish we could leave Other and find a mana geyser. I don't care if it's just my wisp form. I want to move around, hear my voice without using magic, feel the touch of another person. I want to be normal. She sobbed. Without Lith, Mogar looked brighter, but it only made her feel worse. It was a cold light that emphasized everything she never had despite having it just a few centimeters from her. Having the objects of her desires so close, and yet being unable to reach them, was just torture. The moment Solus's ring slipped onto Litha's finger, their experiences flooded into each other's mind. Lith had willingly shared his memories to bring her up to speed, whereas Solus was so overcome with grief that she forgot to hide her feelings. What's this bullshit about you being useless? Lith gave her the telepathic equivalent of a hug. Have you seen what happened to me? How much I missed you. How much I needed you. Not for your abilities, but for who you are. This life is mine as much as yours. Their mind link was fast, but it still took time. Seeing Lith in a daze, his companions repeated their questions with a worried expression. Damn it. I promise you that as soon as we are done here we'll find a mana geyser even if I have to delay finishing my rounds. He thought before focusing on the outside world. Please, I'm dead tired. Lith raised his hands to ask them to let him talk. I know that Professor Manohar is in danger, but I need to sit down for a second and tell you what I learned while dealing with the Dawn Court. Chapter 474. Litha's report left out almost everything that had happened to him. There was no time for storytelling. He emphasized the strength of the array surrounding the outpost before explaining how to bypass it and mentioning their enemy's name. Never heard of her. Journey checked her Royal Constable communication amulet and came out empty-handed. I'll update the crown and let you know their decision. In the meantime, give Lith a tonic and some food. We'll be out of here in 5 minutes tops. Tonics were among the highest grade potions. They temporarily enhanced their user's metabolism, induced a state of relaxation, and provided most of the nutrients required for a hasty recovery. Their effect allowed a body to digest and assimilate a meal in a matter of minutes instead of hours, and relieved mental stress. A tonic couldn't replenish mana reserves, but at least it removed the side effects of mana depletion, like headache, lack of focus, and blurred vision. Litha's physical condition shocked both Tista and Solus. All of his muscles were almost torn due to mana abuse. His life force was flickering from exhaustion, and his mana flow was at less than half capacity. Tista had him sit on a couch, while she used Tier 4 light magic to heal his body and supply him with life force at the same time. It would make him hungry but keep his strength intact. Solus preferred to save her energy for the incoming dangers. She reviewed all of his experiences with the Night and Dawn courts. Solus studied his opponents, trying to find out their weak points and collect enough data to understand how powerful an undead was based on their blood core. The desk clerk, a blonde girl so young Lith suspected she had just finished her academic studies, brought him a purple-colored potion and a tray full of his favorite foods. Lith ate everything and took a deep breath before sharing his experience with the undead. Or at least that was the idea. The combination of the tonic's relaxing effect, the accumulated fatigue, and the comfy couch with Solus keeping watch made him fall asleep until Journey's returned 15 minutes later. "How do you feel?" Once again, Journey didn't like her orders, yet she carried them out nonetheless. "Like someone who could sleep for a week." Lith replied with a groan. "I have bad news. The situation is even worse than we thought, and you are the only one who knows how to operate the array in the old temple. Go get changed. We're leaving as soon as you're done. I'll explain everything along the way." "What about us?" Tista asked. Her experience in Other had made her realize just how helpless she was. How waiting behind the lines was worse than fighting. She felt as if nothing had changed since the days when she was a sick girl. Tista was tired of depending on others, yet neither graduating from the academy nor awakening had allowed her to make any difference. "You are staying here along with the others." "Sorry, kid. This is a spellbreaker-only mission. Don't worry about your brother. We'll have plenty of backup. I'm Manohar's assistant. I'm supposed to go where he goes." The excuse was weak, but it was the only one she could think of. "I like you, Tista. You remind me of my daughter, Quilla." Journey patted her arm, speaking with a soft, motherly tone. "So I'll tell you the same thing I did to her when she asked to join me in my work. In this world, no matter the age, there are two kinds of people. Those born for peace, like you, Linjos, and Quilla. Good people who make this country a place worth fighting for. To make it thrive and grow. Peace comes at a price, though. The same magic that allows you to perform wonders also breeds monsters like the one we are going to face. To keep the peace in here, there's a war to fight out there. In war, you don't need good people. You only need killers who will make peace last one more day. Why do you think your brother, I, and even Manohar got picked for this mission?" At those words, Tista turned toward Dorian, who lowered his gaze and said nothing. "Because we belong to the second kind of people. We are the killers this country needs." Journey noticed that Camilla had turned pale at those words. She moved in front of the lieutenant, who was staring at her in fear. "We are still humans, though." Journey didn't like giving a pep talk to a business rival, but respected Lith too much to purposefully mess with his personal life. "If you cut us, we still bleed. We love and experience pain like anyone else. We're not monsters, and we need a family." Litha's return made the conversation end abruptly. When their gazes met, Lith gave Camilla a warm smile, and she found herself returning it from her heart. Camilla had a hard time making the image of the stingy ranger, who played a song for her and made the camellia match with that of the person who she had seen fight monsters with inhuman ferocity. Lith could feel that the mood in the room was wrong, but since no one was speaking, he described to Dorian the kind of magic crystal which was needed to activate the array. They had to go to the armory to get the right one. Lith pretended to recognize it while Solus extracted from his memories its energy signature and used her mana sense to identify a matching one among dozens of similarly shaped magic stones. "Are you sure?" Dorian was no longer surprised that he hadn't recognized what Lith had been talking about. "That antique is merely for display. It belongs to the age when forge masters had yet to discover how to fuse magic crystals with their creations. The warping array Thrud and the quartz used was an antique as well. Unlike modern warp gates, the magic circle had to be carved rather than built. Their design had been long forgotten because anyone with a proper magic stone could activate them. Ancient warp gates couldn't be imprinted with mana, making them a security nightmare. They had many advantages in present times, though. Without a power source, they couldn't be detected with spells nor with life vision. Also, they could bypass modern dimensional magic blocking arrays because they worked according to different principles than those currently in use. Ancient warp gates would permanently fuse 2 points in space, whereas modern ones could connect to multiple locations via dimensional corridors. It made them more versatile, but also susceptible to being jammed by preventing them from locking on to their exit point's coordinates. Ancient warp steps had no such problem. There was no corridor to create, just a door to open. Lith and Journey left the Mage Association, reaching the old temple by flight. "Do you want the good news or the bad news first?" Journey asked as soon as they took off. "The bad news. This Thrud Griffin is the daughter of Artan Griffin, the Mad King. He was publicly executed centuries ago for his experiments with forbidden magic, which means that Lith couldn't wait for this horrible day to end. That we are about to face one of the oldest and more powerful mages in the Griffin Kingdom's history, who had plenty of time to prepare for our arrival." Journey finished the phrase for him. "I'm starting to think they are right." Lith groaned. "They who?" "The ones who say I'm bad luck." Chapter 475. Tell me that at least the good news is really good. Lith wasn't the type to complain so much, yet Journey understood his reasons. In the space of a few hours, he has faced a vampire, several meat puppets, and whatever opponent the Dawn Court forced him to fight in exchange for their information. I noticed at first glance that he was too tired for someone who was supposed to just have a chat with them. I never saw him so tired, poor kid. It's better to cut him some slack. Very good. First, we don't have to fight unless strictly necessary. Ours is solely a rescue mission. No one expects us to face Thrud Griffin and win. We get in, find Manohar, get out, and destroy the warp gate from others' side. As simple as that. I think you just jinxed the mission. Lith sighed. He had almost forgotten what the word simple meant. Second, we'll only enter after the other spellbreakers have surrounded the outpost. The attack will start when we are sure to have her outnumbered and outmatched. The Crown is calling mages from every corner of the kingdom. Journey ignored his pessimistic remark. Third, since you are tired and I'm not a mage, we'll work with 2 more spellbreakers. Even if I jinx the mission, a team of 5 spellbreakers can hold long enough for the platoon to destroy the array and swarm the place. They reached the old temple of Zal, the god of healing, almost at the same time as their reinforcements. Lith was pleasantly surprised by the unexpected reunion with Professor Vaster and Captain Killian Illyria. Vaster was a short man in his mid-60s, barely over 1.55 meters, 5 feet 1 inch, tall. The top of his head was completely bald while the hair he had left on the sides was snow white, and so were his waxed handlebar mustaches. His belly was so big that it made it hard to guess if he was larger than tall. That, together with his pure white robe, made him resemble a real-life Humpty Dumpty. Oh. Vaster laughed loudly watching them land. Journey. Dear, should I tell Orion to be jealous? This is the second time in less than a month that you worked together with that little demon. You know he likes older women, right? What are you doing here, Vaster? I was expecting Marth. She ignored his remark. Marth is the headmaster of the White Griffin and the second best healer of the kingdom, while this old coot is expendable. Vaster sighed. During his youth, he had been considered eligible for the title of God of Healing multiple times, until Marth became professor, stealing Vaster's spotlight thanks to his achievements. Vaster had dreamed for years of being once again the number 1, but Manohar had outshined both of them like the sun does the stars. Constable Ernest. Killian gave Journey a deep bow before shaking Lith's hand. Long time no see, Lith. I've heard great things about you. They knew each other since the plague in Kaduria and had seen each other again during Balkir's attack on the White Griffin Academy. Killian was a captain in the Queen's Corps. He was a man in his early 30s, around 1.9 meters, 6 feet 3 inches, tall, with shoulder-length pitch-black hair and ice-blue eyes. Thanks, Captain. It's sad that every time we meet there are hundreds of lives at stake, Lith said before entering the old temple. He didn't want to give Vaster enough time to tell them about his days as assistant professor at the academy. There were too many embarrassing details Lith preferred remained forgotten. The runes composing the warping array are mixed with gibberish. We need to look for a hole big enough to fit this mana stone. Lith explained to prevent any further conversation while showing the marble-sized yellow crystal. If we get through this, you'll become the youngest spell breaker in ages. Vasta used air and water magic to clean the altar's surroundings, revealing in the process many more runes on the floor. It will be the perfect moment to get married. Listen to an old fool's advice and don't repeat my mistakes. If you rest on your laurels, your star will start declining sooner than you think. Aim as high as you can now, otherwise you'll have to settle. The professor was one of those people who could talk without losing focus in the matters at hand. Journey and Killian were used to much more annoying quirks, so they didn't mind him. Lith wasn't as patient. I seem to recall you married one of the most beautiful and influential women in the kingdom. He rebuked. How can you call it settling? Back in my heyday, I could have married the crown princess. Vaster sighed. Later I had to give as much as I got, otherwise Villia wouldn't have even looked at me. I found it. Killian cut him short. Right at the center of the altar. Then we have a problem, because there is another hole in the chapel. Journey said while pointing at the feet of the stone statue. There's another one here. Vaster had found a third one at the base of the altar. It's likely that only the right one activates the gate. The others must have defensive properties, like destroying the array or making the temple detonate. Killian was a master warden. That was how he would have defended a strategic asset. Can you describe to me what the Dawn Court's array looked like? I need a starting point to understand what we are dealing with. I can do better. Lith cupped his hands as Solus recalled from his memories the exact design of the warp gate, allowing him to conjure its scaled-size image with light magic. What the fuck? Vaster flinched at the sight. Lith, my boy, are you really like Manohar? What do you mean? This is just what a communication amulet does. It's good for projecting stories for the kids, but that's it. His words made no sense to Lith. According to all the Forge Master books he had read, it was one of the easiest enchantments to apply among those required to make a communication device. You can even move them? Vaster admired look was now shared by Journey and Killian. Fuck me sideways. I'm getting the feeling that what I considered a parlor trick is actually much more important. Lith inwardly cursed. After watching Lith's hologram and studying its runes for a bit, Killian knew what to look for in the archives. Killian used his amulet to access tomes about ancient gates and the runes necessary to activate them. Every time he recognized one, he marked it with a wisp of light. Soon the runes formed a circle. I'm done. Prepare your spells. There will be no time to chant once we get on the other side. Killian warned the group. Journey wasn't a mage, so while the others chanted, she gulped down a few potions just to be safe. Killian placed the magic stone in the hole at the base of the altar. The runes he had marked earlier lit up one after the other, forming a warp gate right in front of the statue. The captain activated the Tier 5 Warden's spell Third Eye before stepping through it. The dimensional door led to a corridor that was full to the brim with arrays made visible by Killian's spell. One of them shone brightly for a second before fading away. I've bad news. The enemy has just been notified of our arrival.